Chapter 1205. Lu Wuxin was enraged when he saw his men fall to the ground dead, but there was nothing he could do. He roared, "I'll fight you to the death." A stream of crimson blood spurted out of her mouth like an arrow released from a bow. With a whoosh, it flew to the top of the blood willow. Immediately, the blood willow emitted a bright red light and began to grow wildly as if it had a second spring. In the blink of an eye, it grew into a towering tree, as tall as a canopy. The hanging willow branches were like devil's claws that could reap lives at any time. When the Yellow Emperor's former subordinates saw this, their eyes lit up and they cheered, "Tang Zheng, you forced her to do this." This time, she used her heart blood to feed the heartless willow. Your time has come. The heart blood contained Lu Wuxin's entire life's worth of cultivation. It was not something ordinary blood could compare to. Tang Zheng did not have time to think. The bright red willow branches quickly entangled him like a group of demons. In an instant, the four symbols venerable was completely surrounded. Charge! Tang Zheng bellowed, controlling the four symbols venerable. It was like a moving mountain, fiercely charging towards the heartless willow. Whoosh! The four symbols venerable was immediately entangled by the heartless willow. Streaks of crimson light appeared on the four symbols venerable's body and flickered. A crimson mark actually appeared on the four symbols venerable's body. This enormous pressure caused Tang Zheng to feel extremely uncomfortable. He fiercely twisted his body and activated his martial arts, only then was he able to resolve all of this. Four symbols venerable, attack. Pooh! The four symbols venerable's eyes emitted a terrifying light. He fiercely pulled at the willow branches, which were immediately torn in two. They struggled on the ground like broken snake tails. Lu Wuxin hid behind, his face gradually turning pale. When the heartless willow used this move in the past, it was always successful, but now, it was actually unable to do anything to Tang Zheng. That damned four symbols venerable, all of this was because of it. If not for this damned fellow, how could Tang Zheng have dodged the attack of the heartless willow? The evolved heartless willow was capable of attacking all living things, but the four symbols venerable was like an insulator, rendering Lu Wuxin's attacks completely ineffective. The attacks of the four symbols venerable were extremely ferocious. He was completely unafraid of the heartless willow and tore apart all the willow branches in a few moves. The clamoring voices of the Yellow Emperor's former subordinates immediately died down. It was as if someone had strangled their throats and made them mute. The pressure on Tang Zheng's body suddenly disappeared. His spirit was greatly boosted. His mind moved, and the shooting sun arrow flew out again. With a puff sound, it directly pierced through the heartless willow, and a big bloody hole appeared. The willow branches and leaves of the heartless willow immediately drooped down, like a defeated soldier, dejected like a stray dog. With a spurt of energy, Tang Zheng roared, "Rise!" The four symbols venerable hugged the heartless willow and used all his strength to pull it up by the roots. In the blink of an eye, drops of blood dripped from the roots of the heartless willow and dyed the ground red. Lu Wuxin was aghast at this scene. She knew how powerful the four symbols venerable was, but she never expected him to be so powerful in Tang Zheng's hands. He was actually not much weaker than when he was in Qiyu's hands. How could the four symbols venerable give her time to be shocked? With a crack, the four symbols venerable was snapped into two at the waist. All the branches and leaves drooped down as if they had lost their souls. Pfft! Lu Wuxin spurted out a mouthful of blood as if she had been ruthlessly stabbed. She was connected to the heartless willow in body and mind, so when the heartless willow was cut into two, her body and mind suffered a similar blow. Naturally, she would vomit blood. In the blink of an eye, her momentum weakened a bit. She hung her head dejectedly and listlessly. Lu Wuxin, you've tried to kill me time and time again. Today, I'll kill you first. Tang Zheng roared. Lu Wuxin was a core member of the Yellow Emperor's former subordinates. If he killed her, it would be a severe blow to them. Naturally, he would not take advantage of this great opportunity. As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of footsteps hitting the ground was earth-shattering. The four symbols venerable charged at Lu Wuxin. Lu Wuxin retreated in panic. Without the heartless willow, her fighting strength was greatly reduced. Against the four symbols venerable, she felt a sense of defeat. Careful! The other former subordinates of the Yellow Emperor screamed and chased after her in an attempt to stop the four symbols venerable's attack. However, the four symbols venerable quickly left them behind and took the lead, instantly arriving in front of Lu Wuxin. Lu Wuxin had nowhere to retreat. Behind her was a bottomless cliff. Even if she could fly, she could not completely escape the four symbols venerable's attack. She clenched her teeth and her eyes flickered as she tried to think of a countermeasure. Suddenly, her eyes lit up as she came up with a plan. I've got it. Tang Zheng, don't you have the 9 yang saint body? Didn't you want to stop me from gathering pure yang energy? I'll fulfill your wish. Tang Zheng did not know that danger was approaching. Although victory was in his grasp, he was still very cautious, afraid that something out of the ordinary would happen. He really did want to kill Lu Wuxin. Lu Wuxin stopped retreating and silently formed a hand seal with her fingers. A formless energy rippled from the ground, immediately causing a subtle change to take place in the massive life totem mountain. The originally concealed pure yang energy erupted like a volcano and soared into the sky like a tornado, instantly engulfing Tang Zheng. This pure yang energy did not attack Tang Zheng. Instead, Tang Zheng was like a giant whirlpool while the pure yang energy was like little boats that were sucked into the whirlpool without resistance. In other words, the pure yang energy contained within the life totem seemed to have found an outlet. Tang Zheng's body trembled and the four symbols venerable immediately stopped. The great inertia almost caused the four symbols venerable to fall off the cliff. What's going on? Tang Zheng's expression greatly changed as he discovered some clues. The enormous pure yang energy had actually rushed into his body like a stream flowing into the sea. In the blink of an eye, the pure yang energy had taken over both his body and mind, surging through his 8 extraordinary meridians to every part of his body. This caused an ominous premonition to surface in Tang Zheng's heart. His body contained a lot of pure yang energy and he was very familiar with this energy. However, he usually kept a respectful distance from it. Now that such an enormous amount of pure yang energy had entered his body, he immediately realized that danger was right in front of him. Pure yang energy was not a good thing for him. If he stored too much in his body, he would be one step closer to the god of death. He knew very well that there were only a few months left until his 20th birthday. That was the time that truly worried him. Although he seemed to have forgotten about this matter on the surface, he was still very clear in his bones that he was still far from being able to overcome this crisis. The pure yin energy he had absorbed before was only a temporary solution to the problem. The final problem was not so easily solved. Seeing the four symbols venerable stop, the others all looked over, not understanding why the four symbols venerable had stopped at the last moment. Chapter 1206. The pure yang energy played a role, causing Tang Zheng to instantly fall into an absolutely dangerous situation. His complexion had already undergone a subtle change. Others might not have noticed it, but Yi Dingdang saw it clearly. She hurriedly asked with concern, "What's wrong?" "Lu Wuxin is channeling the pure yang energy from the life totem mountain into my body. She wants me to explode and die," Tang Zheng said in a deep voice. He had once used this move to deal with Qin Shi Huang. At that time, Qin Shi Huang wanted to absorb the dragon qi and cultivation in his body. He took advantage of the situation and channeled a vast amount of pure yang energy into Qin Shi Huang's body. In the end, Qin Shi Huang's body exploded and Tang Zheng narrowly escaped from the gates of hell, escaping from death. Lu Wuxin also knew the drawbacks of the 9 yang saint body, so she deliberately channeled the pure yang energy to deal with him in the same way. Tang Zheng knew the pros and cons of this move. He hurriedly circulated his cultivation to try and stop the pure yang energy from entering his body. However, the pure yang energy was everywhere and he was powerless to stop it. He could only watch as it entered every part of his body and every meridian. Rumble. In an instant, his meridians were like a great river. The pure yang energy flowing through them was like a surging river. A violent conflict was transmitted to every nerve ending. Ah! Tang Zheng screamed as his meridians were torn apart by the vast pure yang energy. It was as if they were about to be torn apart. Tang Zheng, don't scare me. What can I do for you? Yi Dingdang hurriedly held his hand and asked anxiously. When the two of them held hands, a strong attractive force came from the center of their palms. Hiss! Yi Dingdang sucked in a breath of cold air. It was as if she was facing a black hole. A mysterious energy in her body was being sucked in, as if her entire body was about to be sucked in. A black hole appeared in Tang Zheng's palm, but it didn't absorb anything other than pure yin energy. A lot of the pure yin energy in Yi Dingdang's body was instantly sucked away. Pure yin energy was very important to a woman. It was a component of the body. If it was completely absorbed, it would be fatal to the body. Yi Dingdang knew this point and also guessed that the energy being sucked out of her body was definitely pure yin energy. An intense tearing pain caused her to almost faint. It was like the pain of flesh and bone being separated. She had never experienced it before, but she gritted her teeth and didn't make a sound. She knew that Tang Zheng's pain was definitely more intense than hers. It was evident from his gradually trembling body and his frown and the beads of sweat that dripped down his face. He has reached the most dangerous moment, I have to support him. If he wants to absorb the pure yin energy, then I don't mind giving up all of my pure yin energy, as long as he is safe. She silently made up her mind. However, as her pure yin energy was. Tang Zheng's entire body and mind was resisting the pure yang energy, so he didn't notice the changes in Yi Dingdang's body. A cold energy entered his body and gradually neutralized a part of the pure yang energy, making him feel as if he was bathed in a spring breeze. He took a deep breath and before he could be happy, he found that the cold energy was like a clay ox entering the sea. It was instantly submerged by the mighty pure yang energy. It didn't change the situation. Almost instinctively, he quickly circulated his cultivation and absorbed the pure yin energy. In an instant, the pure yang energy in Yi Dingdang's body was almost emptied. Her body went soft and fell to the ground. She looked at Tang Zheng with blurred eyes. She couldn't even make a sound. She could only open her eyes with difficulty and look at Tang Zheng. She silently prayed in her heart, Tang Zheng, you must get better. You are invincible. Pure yang energy can't defeat you. I believe in you, you can do it. Tang Zheng's eyes were looking straight ahead, so he didn't notice Yi Dingdang on the ground. The last bit of pure yin energy he absorbed finally had an effect, allowing Tang Zheng to avoid the danger of his body exploding. But with the pure yang energy rushing through his body, his meridians had been widened by a third. This kind of tearing pain almost made him faint, but his willpower was extraordinary, so he forcibly resisted it. Tang Zheng, you cannot die. You still have a great responsibility on your shoulders. The life and death of countless people are related to you. You must survive. He secretly warned himself, and his consciousness was gradually pulled back from his wandering state to reality. The scene in front of him became clear. His eyes suddenly opened wide as he looked at Yi Dingdang on the ground. He loudly shouted, Dingdang, what happened to you? He picked up Yi Dingdang and found that her aura was unstable and very weak. His expression changed as he asked, Dingdang, what happened? Yi Dingdang was still conscious, so she weakly said, seeing that you're fine, I'm relieved. Tang Zheng's head trembled as he suddenly remembered the energy that had neutralized the pure yang energy. Wasn't that pure yin energy? In this sealed environment, where could there be pure yin energy? Besides Yi Dingdang, who else could provide it? He immediately realized that he must have absorbed too much pure yin energy, causing Yi Dingdang to become like this. He investigated a bit and found that the pure yin energy in Yi Dingdang's body was very weak, almost negligible. Of course he knew how important pure yin energy was to women. In the past, he had only absorbed a small portion of their pure yin energy. The harmony between yin and yang was beneficial to both parties. This time, he had drained the pond to catch all the fish. The severe consequences could be imagined. She was harmed by me. As if he had been struck by lightning, his entire body began to tremble. Don't be like this. Seeing his remorseful appearance, Yi Dingdang mustered all the strength in her body, stuttering as she tried to persuade him with difficulty. Before she could finish speaking, she had used up all of her strength and almost fainted. Don't speak. I'm here. I'll definitely save you. Tang Zheng tightly hugged her and gently comforted her. Yi Dingdang's lips slightly curled, revealing a happy and sweet smile. Lu Wuxin continuously activated the array, injecting pure yang energy into the four symbols venerable. When she saw the four symbols venerable stop, she knew that her plan had succeeded and could not help but reveal a happy expression. Ha ha ha, Tang Zheng, you're dead for sure this time. Lu Wuxin was very clear how dangerous the situation was after the pure yang energy erupted. Tang Zheng had absorbed so much pure yang energy, and without pure yin energy to balance it, he would definitely die. Let's see how you're going to ruin our plans now. Although we've lost a life totem, we still have other life totems that can gather the soul of the Golden Crow and revive the Yellow Emperor. Coming back from the jaws of death allowed Lu Wuxin to slightly offset the frustration of losing the Heartless Willow. The other former subordinates of the Yellow Emperor cheered and shouted excitedly. Yi Meiyu's eyes flashed with a vicious light. She gritted her teeth and said word by word, Tang Zheng, you only have yourself to blame for going against me. You deserve to die. Bang! With a loud sound, the four symbols venerable took a step forward. This unforeseen event caused the others to feel as if they had been struck by lightning. They looked at the four symbols venerable in a daze as a voice echoed in their minds, what's going on? Didn't Lu Wuxin say that he's dead for sure? Why isn't he dead yet? Could it be that he's struggling on the verge of death? Yes, he must be struggling on the verge of death. An answer appeared in everyone's minds, but they were obviously not confident in their hearts. Bang! With another loud sound, the four symbols venerable took a step forward with his other leg and completely moved. Like a gust of wind, his leg swept towards the former subordinates of the Yellow Emperor, as if he was truly sweeping through an army. Crack, crack, crack. A series of bone-breaking sounds rose and fell, causing one to feel a toothache. The former subordinates of the Yellow Emperor were sent flying into the air, screaming miserably as they quickly fell to the ground, wailing non-stop. Seeing this scene, the surviving former subordinates of the Yellow Emperor kept quiet out of fear and subconsciously retreated. They originally thought that victory was in their hands, but they didn't expect that Tang Zheng would actually not die and launch a fierce attack. Lu Wuxin and Yi Meiyu were stunned at the same time. They stared at the four symbols venerable in disbelief and muttered to themselves, why is it like this? Why didn't the pure yang energy cause his body to explode? The pure yang energy contained in the life totem is so powerful, yet he was still able to survive after it was injected into his body. Lu Wuxin could no longer find the words to describe Tang Zheng. He could only feel a stomach full of shock that was difficult to digest. Senior, what should we do now? Yi Meiyu asked anxiously. Lu Wuxin's expression was cold as he gritted his teeth. After a long while, he said, retreat. Tang Zheng was hiding in the body of the four symbols venerable, so she did not know the specific situation. However, from his current situation, she could tell that the plan to explode his body had failed. Tang Zheng would definitely counterattack, and they might not be a match for Tang Zheng. There was no need to make unnecessary sacrifices. This time, they clearly understood that Tang Zheng was far more powerful than they had expected. The enemies of the Yellow Emperor's old subordinates might not only be Qi Yu. Perhaps, Tang Zheng would rise up and become their true enemy. This was a very frustrating thing, but they had to admit this reality. Hearing the word, retreat, Yi Meiyu felt an intense unwillingness in her heart, but there was nothing she could do. Even Lu Wuxin insisted on retreating, so what could she do? Did she have to fight to the death? That would only be a meaningless sacrifice. Since she had made her decision, she did not hesitate in the slightest. She turned around and rushed towards the foot of the mountain. The others did not react as quickly as she did. Their movements were a little slower, and what welcomed them was the thunderous attack of the four symbols venerable. The sound of bones and flesh breaking could be heard non-stop. One after another, people flew into the sky and fell down, dying one after another. The fighting strength of the four symbols venerable was clearly stronger than before, causing a chill to rise from the soles of Tang Zheng's feet. This meant that the pure yang energy did not reduce Tang Zheng's fighting strength by much, but instead made him stronger. This was too unbelievable, but looking at the scene in front of him, he had no choice but to admit that this was reality. She couldn't care less about the others. She quickly fled to the foot of the mountain. In this battle, not only did she lose the heartless willow, but her body also suffered quite a bit of damage. When she returned this time, she definitely needed to properly recuperate. Chapter 1207. The four symbols venerables swept away all the old subordinates of the Yellow Emperor at the peak of the mountain, leaving only Lu Wuxin and Yi Meiyu, the two fish that escaped the net. However, they were unable to take advantage of the situation and chase after them, because Tang Zheng had also reached the critical moment of life and death. The pure yang energy contained within the life totem entered his body. Even though Yidingdang's purine energy helped him to temporarily avoid the danger of his body exploding, the danger still did not disappear. Bang! The four symbols venerables knelt on one knee and lowered their heads. The fierce and domineering aura around them had decreased by 70 to 80%. If Lu Wuxin saw this scene, he would definitely not have escaped so quickly and would have thought of a way to counterattack. The four symbols venerables were like a mask, causing Lu Wuxin to be unable to see through Tang Zheng's real situation and misjudge the situation. Huff! Huff! Tang Zheng gasped for breath, his face pale. He also knelt on one knee, his posture exactly the same as the four symbols venerables. Yi Dingdang looked at him worriedly, but she could not say anything and was powerless to do anything. Tang Zheng's entire body trembled as if he was struggling on the verge of death. He was very clear on his own situation and knew that he could die at any moment. However, he was not willing to give up. He took a deep breath and used his hands to support himself on the ground and stood up. The four symbols venerables stood up at the same time as him. With a thought, Tang Zheng and Yi Dingdang retreated from the four symbols venerables' body. The four symbols venerables were kept into Sumru world. He stood on the mountain top, the biting cold mountain wind ruffling his clothes. Yi Dingdang lay on the side, her eyes open with difficulty as she stared at him without blinking. Dingdang, I will definitely protect you back and find a way to cure you. Tang Zheng vowed solemnly. Yi Dingdang blinked, not doubting his words at all, but she was more worried about his physical condition. Tang Zheng read her thoughts and the corner of his mouth opened, revealing a bitter smile. He lightly brushed the hair in front of her forehead and said, "Don't worry, I am an unkillable cockroach. I won't die so easily." He took out his phone and dialed the number of his home. After a few beeps, a clear but dignified voice rang out. "Empyrean Fairy, please send someone from home to pick me up. Something has happened here and I can't leave unharmed for the time being." Tang Zheng said concisely. The Empyrean maiden seemed to be very surprised. She asked, "What happened?" "You'll know when someone from my family comes. I'm here. The sooner you get here, the better." Tang Zheng told the Empyrean Fairy's location. With her and her family's intelligence, they would be able to accurately find him. Empyrean Fairy did not ask further, but her heart trembled. Tang Zheng had never asked for help so weakly before. He must have encountered something very serious, so there was no time to lose. The longer he delayed, the more dangerous it would be. Her relationship with Tang Zheng was very subtle. Under the same roof, they met each other day and night. They were no longer ordinary friends. However, after hearing this news, she did not have the time to tell anyone else. She impatiently left the capital and flew straight to her destination. The sky darkened and brightened. Tang Zheng and Yi Dingdang stayed on the peak of the mountain for an entire night. There were no traces of people, and there were no wild beasts either. Tang Zheng lit up a bonfire to drive away the cold for Yi Dingdang. His condition was simply too terrible. There was no way for him to bring her down the mountain safely, so he might as well stay on the mountain and wait for his family. Moreover, Lu Wuxin and Yi Meiyu were extremely cunning. If they were to ambush him at the foot of the mountain, with his current strength, he might not be their match. Therefore, the most effective method was to deal with all changes by sticking to the status quo. Lu Wuxin and Yi Meiyu had indeed not escaped far. They had been hiding at the foot of the mountain for a long time, but they did not see Tang Zheng coming down the mountain. However, they did not dare to rashly go up the mountain, as they were worried that they would not be able to go down the mountain. The two of them hesitated for a long time, but in the end, they did not have the courage to go up the mountain to investigate, so they turned and left. In the middle of the night, the two of them met up with the rest of the group. Seeing the two of them in such a sorry state, Mo Xie's expression changed slightly, but he did not immediately flare up. After the others had all left, he asked in a deep voice, "What happened?" Lu Wuxin lowered his head dejectedly, and told the whole story with righteous indignation. When Mo Xie heard this, his long eyebrows trembled non-stop. His eyes overflowed with a bright light, as if a sharp sword light was about to fly out from his pupils. Tang Zheng actually knows our plan. Yes, he guessed it word for word. Lu Wuxin was also in disbelief. Where did he get this information from? Mo Xie asked, his eyes burning as he stared at Lu Wuxin. Only the two of them knew about this plan, but an outsider knew about the details. Lu Wuxin squinted his eyes and stared back at Mo Xie. Mo Xie's expression relaxed, and said, "Of course it can't be the two of us." Mo Xie could not believe others, but he would not believe that Lu Wuxin and Tang Zheng had colluded in private. This was because he understood Lu Wuxin very well. Lu Wuxin's loyalty to the Yellow Emperor could be seen by the heavens and earth, and would not change. Then how did he know? Yi Meiyu already knew about their plan. Although she was somewhat dissatisfied with them hiding this matter from her, she did not dare to say anything. Seeing that the two of them had fallen into silence, she could not help but ask curiously. Mo Xie looked at her deeply and asked, "What do you think?" Yi Meiyu was startled, and said resentfully, "This junior is ignorant, how could I know?" Mo Xie sighed inwardly, thinking that you are not being modest. Back then, when Nightmare chose you as his disciple, I'm afraid it was not the best choice. Mo Xie was able to see through people, and most people would not be able to escape his fiery golden eyes. Although Yi Meiyu had been acting all this time, deliberately concealing her actions and true style, she still gave herself away and did not escape Mo Xie's eyes. Mo Xie gradually understood this successor of Nightmare Lord. She was indeed not a person with much intelligence and wisdom. It could even be said that she was sometimes stupid. She was narrow-minded and could not achieve great goals. However, Mo Xie did not point it out. He needed Yi Meiyu's strength. Back then, Nightmare Lord played a pivotal role under the Yellow Emperor, and Nightmare Lord's successor would naturally play a pivotal role in the future. After all, Lu Wuxin was not a stupid person like Yi Meiyu. He was experienced and knowledgeable, and after Mo Xie's words, his heart suddenly lit up and he said, "Could it be that he has an expert guiding him from behind?" Mo Xie looked at Lu Wuxin with admiration. As expected of an old friend, they had thought of the same thing. Lu Wuxin could see through Mo Xie's thoughts from his reaction, and it was actually the same as hers. She quickly asked, "Then which expert is guiding him from behind? Could it be that Empyrean fairy?" They knew very little about the Empyrean fairy, as the Empyrean fairy was a person who appeared long after they died. Mo Xie muttered to himself for a while, then shook his head bitterly, "I don't think so. Doesn't look like." Lu Wuxin looked at him in astonishment. Other than the Empyrean fairy, who else could it be? If it was Qiyu, he might be able to see through our plan, but Qiyu and Tang Zheng have already broken off, so it is impossible for him to be in cahoots. Then it must be someone else, but we have not seen any other experts appear in Tang Zheng's life. Lu Wuxin muttered to himself, constantly looking for flaws and key points. Mo Xie still couldn't see through the mystery and helplessly said, "There will be a day when the truth will surface. Since our plan has been exposed, there's no time to lose. We can't afford to slack off. Send everyone to collect the remaining pure yang energy in the life totem as quickly as possible. We can't afford to make any more mistakes this time." Mo Xie's orders were unquestionable, and Lu Wuxin had no objections. He nodded heavily and passed down the order. The Yellow Emperor's old subordinates immediately took action, setting out through the night and rushing to the remaining vitality totems. Lu Wuxin's injuries were not light, so he had no choice but to stay behind and recuperate while waiting for the good news. Mo Xie stood in the darkness, looking up at the stars in the sky. The starry sky had already returned to its appearance from hundreds of thousands of years ago. There was no fog, and the sky was clear. He could clearly see the stars in the sky. Mo Xie couldn't help but think of the scene he had seen under the Tree of Life. That colossus, the Azura, had made his heart palpitate. That big fellow and Tang Zheng were in cahoots. This time, Tang Zheng had not taken out that killing weapon, which meant he had not reached the end of his rope. That made it even harder for people to see through Tang Zheng. He was not like other celestials. Once they absorbed a large amount of pure yang energy, they would die on the spot, their bodies exploding. But Tang Zheng had broken this curse. This puzzled Mo Xie, and he had no choice but to re-evaluate Tang Zheng. This minor character he had never paid attention to before had ruined his plans time and time again, and each time, his strength was more shocking than the last. This was karmic luck. Mo Xie believed in karmic luck. If a person who was not very strong had karmic luck and some true ability, they would definitely become an ambitious and ruthless character. They might even become the ruler of a region. Back then, the Yellow Emperor's karmic luck was better than Qiyu's. That was why he had won and Qiyu had lost. Mo Xie had no choice but to admit that even if Tang Zheng was not as strong as the Yellow Emperor, his karmic luck was not much worse. Could it be that in the ancient era, Qiyu was their enemy, and now that it was the new era, they would have a new enemy? Tang Zheng. Mo Xie had a huge question mark in his heart. Regardless of whether Tang Zheng was a new enemy or not, they could not treat him lightly. They had to treat him the same as Qiyu. Furthermore, he decided to silently investigate the expert behind Tang Zheng. If he could find this expert, perhaps he would be able to accurately assess Tang Zheng's strength and not be caught off guard. Expert? I want to see how strong you are. All kinds of experts from the ancient era have been revived one by one. Perhaps the expert beside him is one of them. If I catch him, then I will definitely have a good chat with him. Let me see what kind of person he is, to actually dare to ruin my good fortune. Chapter 1208. Early in the morning, the sky was turning white. A red sun peeked out from behind the clouds, revealing a shy face. A person covered in morning dew flew over from the horizon. In the blink of an eye, she stepped on the clouds and landed on the peak of the mountain. The mountain breeze blew her snow-white dress, making her look like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. The Empyrean fairy's eyes were like torches as she scanned the mountain peak. Everything was reflected in her eyes. Even the crystal-clear dewdrops on the leaves did not escape her eyes. She immediately saw Tang Zheng standing proudly at the edge of the cliff like a statue. His body was tall and straight, as if he could support the heavens. Yi Dingdang was leaning against his side. Her expression was dispirited and her eyes were blurred. She looked listless. The Empyrean fairy heaved a sigh of relief. As long as the two of them were still alive, the situation was not too bad. Tang Zheng. She called out subconsciously. Tang Zheng's stiff expression suddenly relaxed. He slowly turned around and looked straight at the Empyrean fairy. He felt relieved. A relaxed smile appeared on Tang Zheng's face. You are finally here. What's wrong? The Empyrean fairy asked impatiently. Tang Zheng opened his mouth, trying to explain the reason, but when the words reached his mouth, he was unable to say them out loud, as they were stuck in his throat, and a strong urge to vomit hit his heart. Pfft! He spat out a mouthful of blood. Tang Zheng's face instantly turned pale. This was because he was trying his best to suppress the pure yang energy in his body, bitterly holding on, but when he saw the ninth heaven mystical maiden, his body and mind relaxed, and the pure yang energy went berserk, causing him to instantly vomit blood. The Empyrean fairy was shocked when she saw this. She shouted, "What's wrong with you?" With a slip of her feet, the ninth heaven mysterious maiden flew in front of Tang Zheng and hugged him, preventing him from falling to the ground. I absorbed the life totem's pure yang energy. My pure yang energy erupted," said Tang Zheng with difficulty. The life totem's pure yang energy? The Empyrean maiden was shocked. She lowered her head and looked at the mountain peak under her feet. She recalled the full view of the mountain peak that she had just seen from midair. Although she was a virgin, she was not an ignorant little girl. She knew clearly what the shape of the mountain peak was. She knew a bit about the life totem. However, in her era, the life totem was no longer popular, so she did not pay much attention to it. Now that she heard Tang Zheng mention it, she suddenly realized that this mountain peak was an ancient life totem. It gathered the pure yang energy of heaven and earth. Tang Zheng was also a celestial with the 9 yang saint body. It was easy to imagine how dangerous it would be for him to absorb so much pure yang energy. She glanced at Yi Dingdang beside her and with a flash of inspiration, she immediately understood what was going on with her. This was the result of her absorbing too much of her pure yin energy. She did not sense any pure yin energy from Yi Dingdang's body. It could be seen that almost all of her pure yin energy had been absorbed. Tang Zheng collapsed in the Empyrean fairy's embrace. His face gradually turned from pale to red. His meridians appeared under his skin like little snakes swimming under his skin. That was pure yang energy swimming through his meridians. His meridians gradually swelled up. The Empyrean fairy felt like she was hugging a huge furnace. It was incomparably hot and dry, as if this furnace could explode at any moment. Tang Zheng's consciousness gradually became hazy. He felt like he was walking through a sea of flames. Each flame seemed to want to devour him. The heart-wrenching pain almost caused him to faint. Hiss! He constantly sucked in cold air. Even the cool air was unable to cancel out the heat of the pure yang energy. The flames seemed like they wanted to burst out of his meridians and ignite his entire body. "Please, save him," a weak voice rang out. It was like a soft murmur, begging the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy glanced to the side and saw Yi Dingdang lying to the side. She was using all her strength to look at her with a pleading gaze. That voice had clearly come from her. She was already extremely weak. Saying those words had exhausted all her strength. Her own life was in danger, but she did not forget Tang Zheng. This sincere feeling moved the Empyrean fairy. Usually, Yi Dingdang was a carefree person. She rarely showed such sincere and meticulous feelings and thoughts. This greatly exceeded the Empyrean fairy's expectations. "Don't worry. With me around, he definitely won't die," the Empyrean fairy promised firmly. With her promise, Yi Dingdang felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. She knew the Empyrean fairy's strength too well. She was a woman of her word. Tang Zheng's life was no longer in danger. However, Tang Zheng's pure yang energy had erupted. What could she do? The Empyrean fairy's expression turned serious. She stared straight at Tang Zheng. The expression in her eyes fluctuated. Since she had made a promise, she naturally had to save him at all costs. However, the eruption of pure yang energy was not an ordinary injury. The treatment method was completely different. She must have enough pure yin energy to achieve a balance between yin and yang. Only then can she suppress his pure yang energy and save his life. Yi Dingdang no longer has any pure yin energy. Then, there's only me. She knew what this meant. She had a pure body. This purity had been preserved for thousands of years. Countless people wanted to taint it, but it was all wishful thinking. Among them, Qin Shi Huang was the most fanatical. Qin Shi Huang did not succeed until his death. She looked at Tang Zheng with shining eyes. His delicate and handsome face was 100 times better than Qin Shi Huang's. He was rather similar to the ideal husband in her childhood fantasy. However, she was the daughter of the Emperor of Heaven. Her status was noble. Even if Tang Zheng was outstanding in all aspects, she would not throw herself at him. However, the situation was different now. If she did not take the initiative, would she let Tang Zheng take the initiative? Of course not. He had already lost consciousness and was like a puppet. Everything had to be done by her. Thinking of this, her snow-white cheeks could not help but blush. She gritted her teeth and her hands unconsciously clenched into fists. Her palms were sweaty. She hugged Tang Zheng and moved her feet. With a whoosh, a cool breeze blew past. She and Tang Zheng had already disappeared. In the next second, they jumped off the cliff. Yi Dingdang clearly saw this scene. She opened her mouth but did not shout. She knew that the Empyrean fairy was going to save Tang Zheng. However, she did not know how the Empyrean fairy was going to save him. In her impression, the Empyrean fairy's cultivation was so high that she definitely had countless methods to save him. She did not know. Facing Tang Zheng's situation, the Empyrean fairy only had one way to save him. The Empyrean fairy had the 9 Yin saint body. It was a body that corresponded to the 9 Yang saint body. It contained extremely strong Yin energy and was also an excellent body for cultivation. However, it was also very easy to die prematurely. The Empyrean fairy was the daughter of the Emperor of Heaven. Her status was noble and she had avoided a premature death. The 9 Yin saint body was most suitable for the 9 Yang saint body to balance the Yin and Yang energy and neutralize the pure Yang energy. The Empyrean fairy knew this very well. Therefore, she had absolute confidence that she could save Tang Zheng. However, the scene of saving someone was not suitable for children. It was even more inappropriate to show it in front of others. She hugged Tang Zheng and jumped off the cliff. Her body floated in midair. The white clouds in the sky surged and quickly converged toward the two of them. In an instant, the two of them disappeared into the white clouds. The white clouds were like a curtain, blocking the view of others. In the white clouds, the Empyrean fairy stared at Tang Zheng without blinking. She gently bent down and planted a kiss on Tang Zheng's lips. The Empyrean fairy had never been so close to a man before. When their lips touched, she felt as if she was struck by lightning. She had a strange feeling that she had never felt before. This feeling quickly spread from the kiss to her limbs and bones. It spread through her meridians and soon enveloped her entire body. This feeling is so strange, a voice sounded in her heart. Of course, she knew about the matters between men and women. So this was what it felt like. Entering you really did have a captivating charm. It made her want to go one step further and experience this feeling that she had never experienced before. She breathed out like orchids. Her heart was beating so fast that it felt like it was going to jump out of her throat. Her heart was swaying and her soul was leaving her body. She suddenly bit her tongue and immediately woke up. She realized that at this juncture, she should not have such random thoughts. Calm down, you want to save someone. She kept telling herself. The Empyrean fairy was also a human. She had 7 emotions and 6 desires. In many aspects, she was no different from a normal woman. This kiss seemed to have opened up a new world for her life. She took a deep breath. Her lips did not separate. Instead, she held her breath and circulated her energy. She urged the pure Yin energy in her body to flow into Tang Zheng's body. The pure Yin energy in her body had always been in a controlled state. At this moment, the pure Yin energy was being urged. Like 10,000 horses galloping, it crazily rushed into Tang Zheng's body. The pure Yin energy was actually in danger of going out of control. It seemed like it was going to break free from her control at any moment. She was shocked. This was something that she did not expect. All these years, the purine energy had always been under her control. There was no sign of it going out of control. But why was it that after she urged it, there were signs of it going out of control? She was smart. After a while, she thought of the key point. Her eyes fell on Tang Zheng's face. This was definitely because of Tang Zheng. The pure yang energy in his body was like a bomb that detonated her purine energy. That was why there were signs of it going out of control. In order to save him, I actually put myself in danger. Her face was serious, but she was helpless. This was already an arrow on the string. She could not stop. She could only continue forward. As for the rebellion of the purine energy, she could only think of a way to make up for it later. Of course, Tang Zheng did not know about all of this. He only felt a cool feeling coming from his mouth, as if a person who was about to be dehydrated immediately tasted the taste of water. His throat moved, and he swallowed in large mouthfuls. The mighty purine energy was quickly transmitted from his throat to every meridian and cell. The restless pure yang energy suddenly froze. It quickly merged with the purine energy and gradually calmed down. Tang Zheng let out a comfortable groan. His hands subconsciously hugged the Empyrean fairy. Their skin was tightly pressed together. The purine energy entered Tang Zheng's pores from the Empyrean fairy's pores. Chapter 1209. Tang Zheng's hands became restless, and he subconsciously hugged the Empyrean fairy's body. Her snow-white skin was full of elasticity, and Tang Zheng's palms were pressed together without any reservation. The Empyrean fairy's body trembled, and she couldn't help but tense up like a bowstring that was pulled into a full moon. Her pretty face was full of lust, and her pink face was full of anger, which perfectly explained her reaction. She stared at Tang Zheng without blinking, and a murderous aura flowed out from between her eyebrows, which made people shudder. Tang Zheng was in a daze, and he didn't notice it at all. His hands became more restless, and they instinctively went into her clothes. The Empyrean fairy bit her lips with her snow-white teeth and squeezed out 2 words from between her teeth. Stop! Tang Zheng turned a deaf ear to her and continued to do as he pleased. The Empyrean fairy wasn't a weak woman. Seeing that her persuasion didn't work, and in fact, she knew that she couldn't persuade him, so she immediately took action by force. She grabbed Tang Zheng's hand, and Tang Zheng struggled with all his strength, but he couldn't break free and had to give up. I promise to save you, but I won't let you do whatever you want, she whispered to herself. She had the 9-yin sacred body, which was different from the ordinary purine body. She could freely control the purine force in her body, just like how Tang Zheng controlled the pure yang force. Therefore, she could let the purine force enter Tang Zheng's body without too much physical contact. Of course, Tang Zheng needed too much purine force. If her hands were to be crossed, it would be very time-consuming for the transfer, and kissing could obviously speed up the process. In order to save him, she sacrificed her first kiss, which she had kept for thousands of years. How could she let Tang Zheng do anything else? Although Tang Zheng's body was under control, the purine force was continuously flowing into his lips, making him feel relaxed and happy. His lips opened and closed, making a sizzling sound. The Empyrean fairy's heart skipped a beat. Her face became redder and redder, and her breathing quickened involuntarily. A primitive impulse was born from the bottom of her heart and spread throughout her body, as if wanting to devour her entire body and mind. She had unknowingly let go of Tang Zheng's hand. Having regained his freedom, Tang Zheng burst out with high enthusiasm. His hands tightly hugged the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy tensed up, but soon softened, as if she had melted under Tang Zheng's fingertips and palms. Tang Zheng's hand sneaked under her skirt. Her smooth skin fell into Tang Zheng's palm, as if it was about to be ignited. The Empyrean fairy was shocked. She found that her body was heating up, as if it was not her own. It was as if she was about to lose control. This feeling that she had never felt before made her instinctively alert. Her brain immediately rang an alarm bell for herself. Her eyes shone brightly, and she suddenly trembled. With a low roar, she walked out of her daze. Her eyes were like bright stars in the night sky as she looked at Tang Zheng with burning eyes. Tang Zheng's expression was blank, but he subconsciously froze under the gaze of the Empyrean fairy. He stared into her eyes, and the blank look in his eyes gradually became clear. The Empyrean fairy's eyes seemed to have magic. Like a sharp blade, they pierced through the absurd thoughts in Tang Zheng's mind. The Empyrean fairy was relieved, but when she saw Tang Zheng's eyes gradually returning to normal, she panicked and subconsciously separated her lips from Tang Zheng. Without the injection of pure yin energy, the pure yang energy in Tang Zheng's body became restless again. His face showed pain, and his body twisted as if he was about to explode. The Empyrean fairy was shocked. She quickly leaned forward and pressed her lips on Tang Zheng's. When their lips touched, the continuous pure yin energy was transmitted through the gap between their lips. Tang Zheng immediately calmed down and his restless emotions were instantly soothed. However, Tang Zheng's eyes became clear. They were not blinded by emotions and pure yang energy. They were as bright as the stars. He stared at the Empyrean fairy with burning eyes, and a look of disbelief gradually emerged from the depths of his eyes. He looked at the Empyrean fairy in horror. They were so close, and the key was that their lips were firmly kissed. This was something he had never thought would happen. Although he knew that the Empyrean fairy had the 9 yin sacred body and would be of great use to him, her identity was so noble that he did not have the slightest improper thoughts. In the past, Qin Shi Huang also wanted to touch the Empyrean fairy, but in the end, he died. How could Tang Zheng have thoughts about her so easily? Moreover, the relationship between the two of them was not the same as before. Unknowingly, they had formed an alliance and cultivated a deep comradeship. He would not destroy this rare relationship. However, when he saw the scene of him and the Empyrean fairy kissing, everything fell apart. His brain almost crashed, and he did not understand why it had become like this. The Empyrean fairy also noticed the situation with Tang Zheng. His clear eyes were like steel needles that pierced her heart. She subconsciously turned her head to avoid his eyes. She no longer cared about the pure yang energy in Tang Zheng's body. She took a few steps back and widened the distance between them. Tang Zheng felt that the pure yang energy in his body was suddenly startled and showed signs of going berserk again. He had already regained consciousness and hurriedly activated his mysterious art to suppress the signs. He had absorbed too much pure yin energy from the Empyrean fairy. Although it was not enough to completely balance his pure yang energy, it was enough to temporarily get him out of danger. A pair of eyes stared at each other like this. The air was dead silent, and even the sound of the wind had disappeared. Only the white clouds around them gently drifted, as if they were each other's situation. On the surface, they seemed to be motionless, but in reality, their hearts were in turmoil. No one knew how many waves had been stirred up. This. Tang Zheng's throat moved, and he spat out a word with difficulty. The Empyrean fairy's face turned cold, and she interrupted him, "I was trying to save you. This is a temporary measure. Don't let your imagination run wild." She seemed to be afraid that Tang Zheng would say something absurd, so she spoke the truth first. She really did not have any improper thoughts about Tang Zheng, and it was all a temporary measure to save him. But after the two kissed, a strange thought appeared in her heart. She was actually immersed in it, unable to extricate herself. Could it be that she really enjoyed that kind of situation? No. This must be an illusion. She had cultivated for thousands of years, and had never wavered in the slightest. How could she be shaken just because of this? She absolutely would not allow it. Hearing this, Tang Zheng's thoughts were complicated. He seemed to be a little disappointed, but also a little relieved. He could not tell if he was relieved by this answer, or if it was some other feeling. However, he immediately composed himself and calmly said, "I understand. Thank you for saving my life. I am unable to repay you, but if you have any orders, I will not dare to disobey." Seeing his serious appearance without any other thoughts, the Empyrean fairy felt a sense of loss. It was incomparably complicated and indescribable. Chapter 12:10. The ambiguity between the two was restrained by each other and did not continue to ferment. As their eyes met, everything seemed to have quietly returned to normal. In reality, the two people involved did not know that two strange seeds had taken root and sprouted in their hearts. The Empyrean fairy turned and flew towards the cliff with Tang Zheng following behind like a shadow. Seeing Yi Dingdang, Tang Zheng hurriedly rushed over to help her up and asked with concern, "How are you feeling?" Yi Dingdang stared straight at Tang Zheng. Seeing that he was safe and sound, she let out a sigh of relief as a smile appeared at the corners of her eyes. She opened her mouth and squeezed out two words with difficulty, "I'm fine." "You call this fine?" Tang Zheng said in pain as he suddenly turned his head to look at the Empyrean fairy and asked, "Can you save her?" The Empyrean fairy bent down and placed her fingers on Yi Dingdang's pulse. After a while, she frowned and said, "The purine energy in her body has already been exhausted. There's nothing I can do to save her." After saying this, she let out a long sigh. Of course she knew that Yi Dingdang's purine energy had been completely absorbed by Tang Zheng. This was equivalent to Yi Dingdang using her own life in exchange for Tang Zheng's life. This great kindness and love was truly moving. The Empyrean fairy looked at Yi Dingdang with sparkling eyes, as if she wanted to discern from her reaction where her courage and perseverance came from. In the end, she did not find the answer she wanted. She saw that Yi Dingdang's eyes were filled with tenderness as she looked at Tang Zheng. Hearing this, Tang Zheng felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His body shook violently as he asked in a trembling voice, "How could it be like this? Is there really no way at all?" The Empyrean fairy looked at Yi Dingdang with pity and shook her head regretfully, "There really is no other way. Pure-ine energy is the foundation of a woman. Once the foundation is damaged, then the person will naturally be ruined." Tang Zheng felt as if the sky was about to collapse. He had originally vowed that he would cure Yi Dingdang, but he never expected that he would be unable to do so. This was equivalent to giving Yi Dingdang a death notice. No. He shook his head violently, unwilling to believe this cruel reality. There must be a way. His eyes burned as he stared at the Empyrean fairy. He unconsciously grabbed her hand and said excitedly, "You must have another way, right? Even if there is only a sliver of hope, no matter the price, I am willing to try." The Empyrean fairy's hands were caught. She struggled slightly before she managed to free herself from Tang Zheng's grasp. Her eyes twitched violently. She seemed to be moved by Tang Zheng's attitude. After hesitating for a moment, she gave a cruel answer. "I have no other way." Yi Dingdang looked at Tang Zheng's soulless and pained appearance and a tear fell from the corner of her eye. She wasn't crying because she was afraid that she wouldn't live for long, but because she felt sorry for Tang Zheng. She took a deep breath with difficulty and used all of her strength to stutter, "Tang Zheng, don't be like this. This is my life. As long as you always have me in your heart, it doesn't matter. I am willing." "No." Tang Zheng tightly hugged her and forcefully shook his head. His neck seemed like it was going to break. "I want you to always be with me. In the past, I was always busy and didn't have time to be with you. From now on, I want to spend more time with you. You can't leave me and I won't allow you to leave me." These words were very overbearing. When Yi Dingdang heard this, the corners of her eyes bloomed with a smile, but she didn't have the strength to respond. She just stared at him without blinking. The complex emotions in her eyes were very moving. Tang Zheng looked at Yi Dingdang and then stared at the Empyrean fairy. Seeing that she was helpless, his heart was like dead ashes. It was as if he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. Yi Dingdang could feel Tang Zheng's despair and pain, but she was also helpless. She didn't even have the strength to speak again. Tang Zheng carried Yi Dingdang and walked step by step to the foot of the mountain. He didn't say a word. The Empyrean fairy quickly chased after him. She wanted to ask what was going on this time, but she swallowed her words. Now was clearly not a good time to ask these questions. The three of them accompanied each other silently as they traveled through the night and night back to Beijing. When they returned home, everyone in the house saw the scene of Tang Jing carrying Yi Dingdang. They were all stunned and began to ask about the reason. Seeing that Tang Jing didn't say a word, everyone looked at the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy shrugged her shoulders and helplessly shook her head. She also didn't completely understand what was going on. On the way back, Tang Jing didn't say a word. He was completely immersed in pain. His every expression and every action was filled with deep pain. It made people feel as if they were in his shoes. The Empyrean fairy suddenly had a flash of inspiration. It was as if she had been enlightened. She actually understood the problem that had been troubling her. Yi Dingdang was willing to sacrifice so many people for Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was like a walking corpse, suffering great pain. These two people had sacrificed themselves for each other and paid a great price. All of this was because of love. The Empyrean fairy had never experienced love before. She also never thought that love would have such great magic that it would make people willingly make such great sacrifices and changes. However, looking at the two of them, she seemed to understand that the magic of love was far beyond her imagination. If I could also experience the magic of love, what kind of scene would that be? A strange thought suddenly appeared in her mind. It gave her a fright, but she quickly suppressed this thought. She had been chaste for over 1,000 years. How could she change so easily? Fang Shishir rushed over and firmly grabbed Yi Dingdang's hand. She loudly shouted, "Dingdang, what's wrong?" Yi Dingdang opened her eyes and looked at Fang Shishir. She lightly blinked her eyes and pretended to be relaxed as she revealed a playful expression. It was as if she wanted to comfort Fang Shishir. However, Fang Shishir saw her like this and felt as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. She and Yi Dingdang had unknowingly changed from rivals in love to sisters. Their hearts had long since walked together. They tightly hugged each other and accompanied each other. Tang Dahai's expression was solemn as he walked over. Seeing that Tang Zheng was silent and didn't reply to the other people's questions, he asked, "Little Zheng, tell us, what happened?" Hearing his grandfather's words, Tang Zheng finally raised his head and swept his gaze across everyone's faces. Everyone deeply felt the sorrow in his heart and their hearts were filled with sorrow. When we went to the Ye family, we discovered a strange phenomenon. Tang Zheng explained in detail that they had gone to the Ye family, then followed Yi Meiyu's magic all the way and discovered the plot of the Yellow Emperor's old subordinates. Furthermore, they had a great battle. Tang Zheng's pure yang energy had exploded, and Yi Dingdang was willing to sacrifice herself to save his life. Chapter 12:11. Everyone stared fixedly at Yi Dingdang. Yi Dingdang's cheeks flushed red as she lowered her eyes in embarrassment. She thought to herself, how can I be as good as he says, but she couldn't say a single word. The other point also attracted everyone's attention, especially when Tian Chanzi heard that Yi Meiyu had controlled the Ye family. He was extremely surprised, that little girl has actually become so powerful. Tang Zheng nodded his head heavily. Yi Meiyu is no longer the same as before, and she has successfully escaped this time. If we meet her in the future, we must be careful, as Heart's Dream's traceless spell is not ordinary. If we are to be tricked by her, we will become her slave. Tian Chanzi coldly snorted, she won't have that chance. I know a little about the life totem you're talking about. There are still so many life totems left, so it's impossible for us to defeat them one by one. Wouldn't they succeed? Tian Chanzi said worriedly. However, Tang Zheng did not give up and said, if you don't work hard, how do you know you won't succeed? Once they gather enough pure yang energy, the soul of the golden crow will reappear in the world. No one wants to see that happen. Tian Chanzi stared at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze, and finally nodded his head and said, all right, I'll listen to you. After pausing for a moment, he said, then why are you fine after absorbing so much pure yang energy? Tang Zheng's eyes flashed, and he said without hesitation, I won't die for the time being. The pure yang energy in his body had not been calmed down for the time being, but he knew that the pure yang energy had indeed increased. Even with the pure yin energy neutralizing it, the pure yang energy in his body had increased, and once it erupted again, he could not predict what would happen. However, now was not the time to think so much. He had to think of a way to save people and stop the Yellow Emperor's former subordinates. We don't have enough manpower. If we reveal this news to Chiyu, he will definitely be very interested. Empyrean Fairy had an idea and said thoughtfully. The others' eyes lit up, especially Tian Chanzi, who immediately agreed, that's a good idea. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman will benefit. Tang Zheng was not a person who was bound by formalities. Now that the situation on his side was not optimistic, it was a good idea to use Chiyu with a small plan. Alright, let's reveal the news to him. Tang Zheng agreed. Although Chiyu's whereabouts were mysterious, Tang Zheng believed that Chiyu would definitely leave an informant and keep an eye on him. Therefore, it was not difficult to reveal this information to Chiyu. Yi Dingdang became like this in order to save Tang Zheng. The old man's heart was heavy. She was a big girl, but in the end she became like this. It was easy to imagine the burden on the old man's shoulders. I know, grandfather. Tang Zheng nodded his head with a heavy face. He immediately gave Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang a call. After saying a few simple words, he hung up the phone. Everyone in the room had worried expressions. Fang Shishir accompanied Yi Dingdang by her side, secretly crying. She was a strong girl, but seeing her best friend like this made her heart feel like it was being stabbed by a knife. It was more painful than what happened to her. A moment later, Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang rushed in. Feng Xinyang shouted, "What happened to Dingdang?" When she saw Yi Dingdang lying on the sofa, motionless, with a weak breath, Feng Xinyang's face changed. She rushed over like the wind and grabbed Yi Dingdang's hand. She asked with concern, "Dingdang, what happened to you?" Yi Dingdang blinked her eyes and tried to squeeze out a smile, but there was no reaction. Feng Xinyang and Yi Tianlei looked at each other, their hearts thumping as they revealed an aghast expression. As parents, they were most afraid of seeing this scene. The two realized that the situation this time was not normal and that something serious had happened to their daughter. Yi Tianlei, as a man, was relatively steady. He looked at his daughter and his gaze fell on Tang Zheng. Seeing his dignified expression and unconcealable grief, Yi Tianlei's heart immediately sank into the abyss. He took a deep breath and suppressed the emotions in his heart with difficulty. He asked, "Tang Zheng, what exactly happened to Dingdang?" Tang Zheng did not have time to reply before the old man took the initiative and said with incomparable shame, "Tianlei, I want to solemnly apologize to you. Our family did not protect your precious daughter. She became like this because of little Zheng. We will definitely not shirk the responsibility. Little Zheng will definitely take responsibility to the end." A simple old man did not have many comforting words, and this was the most sincere expression. When Yi Tianlei heard these words, it was as if he was struck by lightning. He understood the seriousness of the situation and his body swayed. In the end, he forced himself not to fall down and said with a trembling voice, "Old man, let's not talk about this first. Let's first figure out what happened." Feng Xinyang called out to her daughter a few times but there was no response. She also raised her head and stared at Tang Zheng, wanting to understand the truth. Tang Zheng explained the whole story in detail and finally said with extreme grief, "Uncle Yi, Aunt Feng, Dingdang became like this because she wanted to save me. I, Tang Zheng, am an indomitable man and will definitely take responsibility to the end. No matter if it is a mountain of blades or a sea of flames, I will definitely save Dingdang. Is there really no other way?" Feng Xinyang asked with a trembling voice. The usually carefree Feng Xinyang's face was heavy and there was a trace of fear on her face. This was the true feelings of a mother. No matter what her usual style was, at this time, her maternal side was naturally exposed. Tang Zheng shook his head. Even the Empyrean Fairy did not have a way, what else could he do? However, he did not completely give up hope. If Yi Dingdang was really unfortunate enough to leave this world, then her soul would go to the ghost realm. For her, he was willing to enter the ghost realm once more and plead with Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva to let her be reborn. But there was no doubt that this was the most hopeless method. If she was reborn, perhaps she would not be in this body. Would that still be Yi Dingdang? The soul was, but the body was not. Therefore, it would not be a complete Yi Dingdang. Unless there was no other choice, he would definitely not take this step. But was there any other way? Facing Feng Xinyang's question, Tang Zheng's throat moved. He swallowed his saliva and blurted out, "No dash." Before he could finish the second half of his sentence, he was interrupted by a voice. "Don't jump to conclusions yet. I found a way." This voice was like a bolt of lightning that split open the clouds above his head. His heart tightened and his eyes lit up. He asked with anticipation, "Inner demons, you have a way." Previously, the inner demons had been silent and the Empyrean fairy had vowed that there was no other way. Tang Zheng had almost forgotten about the inner demons. Chapter 12:12. The inner demons had been silent the whole time, but they suddenly spoke. This meant that they had thought it through carefully. Tang Zheng naturally thought of this point, and his mood became excited. The inner demon's proud voice sounded again, "Who am I? How could such a small matter be difficult for me?" Tang Zheng ignored the inner demon's boasting and hurriedly asked, "Then what can we do?" The inner demons muttered, "Find a place of absolute yin and re-inject pure yin energy into Yi Dingdang." Ah! Tang Zheng was shocked. He had never heard of a place of absolute yin. Where is this place of absolute yin? Look at you making a fuss. What is there to make a fuss about? You have to know that since there is a life totem in this world that gathers pure yang energy, then there will also be a place where pure yin energy gathers. The inner demons explained. Tang Zheng suddenly realized that it made sense. But the key point was that a place of absolute yin was not an ordinary place. It was not easy to find. Do you know where there is a place of absolute yin? Tang Zheng asked the key point. The inner demons stammered, "As long as you put your heart into it, you will find it." Tang Zheng rolled his eyes. The inner demons did not know. Then the chances of finding a place of absolute yin were close to zero. Seeing his silent and uncertain expression, the other people's gazes were all attracted to him. Feng Xinyang was worried about her daughter's safety and asked, "Tang Zheng, is there really no other way?" Tang Zheng seemed to have woken up from a dream. He looked at Feng Xinyang in a daze, wanting to say something but hesitating. "If you have something to say, just say it. Why are you still being so wishy-washy at this time?" Feng Xinyang said sternly. The old man also earnestly advised, "Little Zheng, if you have any ideas or difficulties, just say it. Everyone can pool their wisdom and work together." Tang Zheng pondered for a moment and said, "There is a way, and that is to find a place of extreme yin energy. From there, we can inject pure yin energy into Dingdang's body and let her fully recover." Yin field. Tian Chanzi immediately raised his eyebrows and exclaimed, "The land of extreme yin is the most dangerous place in the world, and very few people know about it. In any case, as far as I know, no one in my generation knew about the yin terminating land." It was said that the yin field was very beneficial to many people who practiced the yin soft cultivation method. It could greatly increase one's power in a short period of time. Of course, there were many dangers in it as well, and the slightest carelessness would cause one to be consigned to eternal damnation. Therefore, the land of extreme yin is a place that people both love and hate. Hearing Tian Chanzi's introduction, everyone's interest was piqued, especially Feng Xinyang and Yi Tianlei, who said at the same time, "No matter how dangerous the land of extreme yin is, as long as there is a chance for Dingdang, then we will not hesitate even if we have to die 10,000 times. We will definitely not give up." As parents, how could they watch as their daughter's life was hanging by a thread and remain indifferent? Even if there were thousands of difficulties and tens of thousands of dangers, they would still step forward without hesitation. Empyrean Fairy did not say a word, but her expression subtly changed. The others did not notice her change as their attention was firmly attracted by Tang Zheng. Yi Dingdang heard that it was so dangerous and blinked with all her might, as if she wanted to dissuade her parents from taking the risk, but to no avail. On the contrary, Fang Shishir said with a resolute expression, "For Dingdang, I will also go to the land of extreme Yin. I must find a way to save Dingdang." Yi Dingdang heard this and the corners of her eyes flashed with tears. She tried to use her eyes to stop Fang Shishir, but there was no way. "Shishir, if there is a next life, I will definitely be your sister again." Yi Dingdang silently thought in her heart. These days, she and Fang Shishir were together and understood each other more and more. In the past, although they were classmates, they were like people from two different worlds and did not understand each other that much. Now that they were living under the same roof, getting along day and night, and had a tacit understanding to form a united front, their friendship grew day by day and they had developed into sisters. Seeing everyone's solemn vow, Tang Zheng said solemnly, "Everyone's morale is commendable, but the key is that no one knows where the land of pure Yin is. We do not have any clue or direction, we are like headless flies, aimlessly moving around. Although the land of extreme Yin is mysterious, there will definitely be some records of it in the long river of history. Let's go through the ancient records and maybe we will find something." Fang Shishir was smart and quick-witted, immediately thinking of a way. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up. There were many amazing people in the archaeology department who had read all kinds of historical materials, maybe they would find something. This made him overjoyed as he hurriedly said, "Everyone, don't worry, I will go back to the school to organize people and investigate where the land of extreme Yin is." However, this was a long-term and huge project. It was almost impossible to restore Yi Dingdang in a short period of time. This was a desperate situation, trying to treat a dead horse as a living horse. "Wait!" Suddenly, a pleasant voice exploded, but it was like rolling thunder that swept over. Empyrean Fairy stood up, her expression was strange as she looked at Tang Zheng strangely. Tang Zheng's head moved as he asked, "Do you have any ideas?" Empyrean Fairy was not in a hurry to answer, but asked back, "Are you sure that the land of pure Yin has a way to save Dingdang?" Hearing her question, Tang Zheng said solemnly, "I'm sure." The inner demons would not speak nonsense, they definitely had 100% certainty. Empyrean Fairy looked deeply at Tang Zheng, but did not ask where his information and confidence came from because she believed in Tang Zheng. She only said meaningfully, "I also don't know of this method. But since you're so confident, you must have a plan. In this world, there are very few places with no Yin. Moreover, many of them contain extremely strong Yin energy. Once it is injected into the human body, it can make the person lose their mind and finally turn them into a killing machine. Only a pure place with no Yin can save Dingdang and eliminate those side effects." Empyrean Fairy said with certainty, which made everyone gasp in admiration. "Fortunately, I know a pure place with no Yin that can meet your requirements." The Empyrean Fairy paused for a moment and said proudly. Seeing that everyone was looking at her expectantly, she took a deep breath and finally revealed the answer to the riddle. "Elysium. This is a place with no Yin. The main reason why I was able to survive the 9 Yin divine bodies tribulation and survive until now is mainly because of Elysium." When the others heard this answer, they were stunned. Tian Chanzi was also stunned. He knew a thing or two about Elysium's illustrious reputation, but it was too mysterious and had long disappeared, so he did not think much about it. Tang Zheng also exclaimed and shouted in shock, "Elysium? Why did you think of Elysium?" Chapter 12-13. The Gate of Heaven was a place of Yin elimination and could save Yi Dingdang. This news was beyond everyone's expectations and lit a fire of hope. Everyone looked at the Empyrean Fairy with burning eyes. The Empyrean Fairy glanced at Yi Dingdang and said calmly, "The Gate of Heaven is my father's legacy. If it wasn't to save Dingdang, I would never have made it public." The others also understood this logic and were secretly convinced by the 9th Heaven mystical maiden's deep sense of righteousness and generosity. This was especially true for Yi Tianlei and his wife. They took a few steps forward and directly arrived in front of the 9th Heaven mystical maiden. Their words were sincere and incomparably moved as they said, Fu Yao, thank you. As long as we can save Ding Dang, we will work like cows and horses to repay your great kindness. The Empyrean fairy looked at the two calmly and pointed at Tang Zheng, you don't have to thank me. Although I know that the gate of heaven is a place of yin elimination, I don't know how to save her. You should thank Tang Zheng. Yi Tianlei and his wife quickly turned to look at Tang Zheng. Before they could say anything, Tang Zheng took the initiative and said, Uncle Yi, Aunt Feng, this is my duty. I won't shirk my duty. Hearing him say this, the two felt relieved. Feng Xinyang nodded secretly. She didn't misjudge him. This handsome young man was affectionate and righteous. She was relieved to entrust her daughter to someone like him. After saying this, Tang Zheng couldn't wait to ask the Empyrean fairy, where is the gate of heaven? We will go now. The gate of heaven is not as simple as you think. It is a place of yin elimination. When my 9 yin saint body broke out, I used a large amount of pure yin energy in the gate of heaven to suppress it. Then I was lucky to escape. The Empyrean fairy explained patiently. Shouldn't the 9 yin saint body break out with pure yang energy? Why did you use pure yin energy to suppress it? Isn't this adding fuel to the fire? Tang Zheng asked in surprise. The others didn't understand what was going on either. They all looked at the Empyrean fairy suspiciously. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. Extreme yang produces yin, and extreme yin produces yang. This is interconnected, the Empyrean fairy said concisely. Tian Chanzi looked pensive as he muttered to himself, I've heard of this principle before, but I don't know how it works. Of course there's a secret behind it. Even if a normal person knew this, it would be impossible for them to achieve this effect. My father is extremely capable, which is why he was able to achieve this. The Empyrean fairy said proudly. Since her father had been bestowed the title of Emperor of Heaven, this title was not ordinary. He was definitely not an ordinary person, but a powerful person. Does that mean I can't use your method to absorb more pure yang energy and achieve the goal of balancing yin and yang? Tang Zheng asked in disappointment. Just now, he had thought of this fluke in his mind, but after listening to the Empyrean fairy's explanation, he had to throw this idea out of the window. The Empyrean fairy looked deeply at Tang Zheng. Although she knew that Tang Zheng had always been good at creating miracles, she still didn't think that Tang Zheng had the luck and ability to create such a miracle. Looking at the Empyrean fairy's eyes, although she didn't say a word, Tang Zheng already understood her thoughts. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. He took a deep breath and suppressed this unrealistic and absurd idea. He said, let's not talk about other things for now. Let's go find the gate of heaven first. Saving people is more important. Okay. The Empyrean fairy nodded, the gate of heaven is hidden in the world. I have to lead the way before you can go there. Otherwise, you won't be able to find the way. But one day, the world will change. The gate of heaven will experience the changes of the world. As for what it has become, it is hard for me to predict. Even if there are thousands of difficulties and dangers, even if there are mountains of blades and seas of fire, I still have to go. Tang Zheng said without fear. He had just returned home, but he had to go on a long journey. Time waits for no one. When Yi Dingdang heard that there was a ray of hope, the flames of hope lit up in her eyes. She looked at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze. Tang Zheng gently stroked her forehead and said softly, don't worry. With me here, I will definitely save you. Yi Dingdang blinked, indicating that she understood. We also want to go. Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang said dutifully. Yi Dingdang was their daughter. Of course, they couldn't stay out of it. Tang Zheng glanced at the Empyrean fairy. Seeing that she didn't object, he also nodded. I'll go too. I can take care of Dingdang along the way. Fang Shishir volunteered. The others were also eager to go. Tang Zheng was afraid that everyone would rush to go first. If too many people went, there would be too many unknowns. Having more people might not be a good thing, so he hurriedly waved his hand to stop them. There are enough people. Someone must stay at home. Tian Chanzi, you stay at home to protect everyone. If there are any problems, immediately contact us. Tian Chanzi also wanted to see the famous Gate of Heaven, but he also understood that Tang Zheng's arrangement was very reasonable. It was impossible for there not to be a master at home. Now that they were surrounded by strong enemies, they couldn't let their guard down. Tian Chanzi nodded embarrassedly. He could only accept this arrangement helplessly. Seeing this, the others no longer volunteered. They all comforted them with kind words. This time we are going to see. We won't reach it in 3 or 5 days, so everyone needs to be mentally prepared. The Empyrean fairy suddenly reminded them. See? Yes, the Gate of Heaven is at the end of the world, where heaven and earth meet. Everyone looked at each other. The ancients would have such a mysterious description, but for the modern people, there was no such thing as the end of the world, where heaven and earth meet, or it could be said that there was a visual error. The Empyrean fairy was influenced by modern knowledge. Obviously, she also understood that this sentence couldn't stand up to scrutiny. She added, in short, it's very far. In ancient times, it would take several months to reach it. Tang Zheng nodded secretly. The ancient people's technology was behind. For the modern people, a few months of sailing could be reached in 10 days. Now, time was tight. 10 days wasn't a short period of time. After they finalized the itinerary, Tang Zheng immediately contacted the Yen family. They needed a large ship to cross the ocean. The Yen family owned a shipping company, so they were naturally the best choice. After the Yen family heard about it, they naturally didn't refuse. A moment later, the Yen family's car stopped outside the villa. Yen Luyun and Yen Qingyi got out of the car and walked straight in. After seeing the two of them, Tang Zheng was shocked. He said, "Why are you here?" The old man heard your anxious tone. Something big must have happened, so he sent me to mediate. It'll be more convenient. Yen Luyun explained. Tang Zheng nodded. This time, they needed to borrow the Yen family's power. If the young master of the Yen family accompanied them, it would be much more convenient. His gaze then fell on Yen Qingyi. He couldn't see through this person who could see the future. Yen Qingyi saw through Tang Zheng's doubts and said, "I saw a door slowly opening in front of you. It was as if there was a voice from the unseen world guiding me, telling me to travel with you this time." Hearing how mysterious her words were, everyone was astonished. However, after seeing Yen Qingyi's prophecy, they didn't dare to underestimate her. Door? What kind of door? The Empyrean fairy frowned and asked. Yen Qingyi glanced at the Empyrean fairy and took out a scroll. There was a huge bronze door drawn on it. It was as if it was supporting the heavens and the earth. It was extremely huge. An invisible pressure made people feel very small. There were also complicated patterns carved on it that flickered with a mysterious light. The Empyrean fairy's gaze was firmly attracted by this painting. She suddenly raised her head and stared at Yen Qingyi with burning eyes and asked, "How do you know about this door?" "This is the image I saw. You are standing in front of this door, as if you want to open it." Yen Qingyi said calmly. "You actually saw the Gate of Heaven." The Empyrean fairy couldn't hide her shock and muttered to herself. "So this is called the Gate of Heaven. What a special name." However, looking at its tall and mighty appearance, it really does look like a door to heaven. Yen Qingyi nodded and analyzed thoughtfully. Hearing the two words Gate of Heaven, Tang Zheng and the others immediately stared at the painting, as if they wanted to firmly imprint its appearance in their minds. This was especially true for Tian Chanzi. He couldn't go to the Gate of Heaven this time, so he especially wanted to see what it looked like. "You said that there was a voice that seemed to be calling you. What was that voice?" The Empyrean fairy frowned and asked in a deep voice. This was related to the Gate of Heaven. This was a relic left by her father, the Emperor of Heaven. Naturally, she would be extremely careful. Yan Qingyi shook her head in disappointment. That voice was too mysterious. I can't explain it clearly. It seemed to jump out from the depths of my mind, but also seemed to be transmitted to my ears from a very far place. Everyone looked at each other. It seemed that Yan Qingyi couldn't explain it clearly. Okay, then you can come with us. The Empyrean fairy thought for a while and agreed. Tang Zheng naturally didn't have any objections. Yan Luyun saw Yi Dingdang lying unconscious on the sofa. He wanted to ask what had happened and what the purpose of this trip was, but Tang Zheng had already said, time is of the essence. Let's talk while we walk. When everyone arrived at the port, Yan Luyun and Yan Qingyi already knew the ins and outs of the matter. When they heard that they were going to the Gate of Heaven, and that the Gate of Heaven was very mysterious, Yan Luyun looked very excited, and his face turned red. Yan Luyun was the young master of a big family. Although he was usually very free, there were very few opportunities for adventure. This time, he could actually go out to sea to explore the unknown and mysterious Gate of Heaven. How could he not be excited? The Empyrean fairy chose a direction, and the big ship set off towards the destination. In the cabin, Tang Zheng was guarding Yi Dingdang closely. Their eyes met, and invisible information was exchanged through their eyes. They were very tacit. The two of them didn't need to say a word. Just a simple look and subtle expression was enough to express too much. When Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang saw this scene, they tactfully left the room. They were relieved, but also worried about their daughter's life. They stood on the deck and looked into the distance. The vast sea and the scenery were vast, but it couldn't dispel the worry in their hearts. The Empyrean fairy also stood at the bow of the ship with her hands behind her back. She was indifferent. Everywhere she looked, familiar and strange scenes entered her eyes. Chapter 12-14. Time flies, and the sea turns into mulberry fields. This waterway seemed familiar, like the way home. It was familiar yet strange. However, the blue sea and blue sky made the Empyrean fairy recall things from a long time ago. Thousands of years ago, she was a completely different person than she was now. She was in the prime of her life, the youngest daughter of the celestial emperor, the proud daughter of heaven. Her status was noble, and she stood above millions of people. Countless people revered her. She was very arrogant, and very few people could enter her eyes. However, when she was 20 years old, the power of pure Yin exploded. She was on the verge of death and was afraid. She had never experienced fear before, but this time, she truly experienced the taste of fear. It was the taste of death. Any courage in the face of death would collapse completely. It was not worth mentioning. She realized that she was afraid of death. She was as weak as those people she looked down on. She was even slightly weaker. In fact, the Emperor of Heaven had discovered her 9 Yin saint body since she was born. However, he kept quiet and did not tell anyone. Even the Empyrean fairy herself did not know. Since then, the Emperor of Heaven began to find a way to save his daughter's life. In fact, the power of pure Yin could be like the body of pure Yang. It could absorb the power of pure Yang from different men and achieve the balance of Yin and Yang. However, how could the Empyrean fairy do such a thing with her status? Even if it was to survive, she would not take off her noble appearance. Of course, this path would not work. The Emperor of Heaven racked his brains and flipped through ancient books, trying to find a way to solve this problem from the long river of history. In the long river of history, there were other women with the 9 Yin saint body. However, they either died at the age of 20 or became promiscuous women. They absorbed the power of pure Yang from men and were like demons. The Emperor of Heaven's heart was dead. He almost lost all hope. However, his responsibility and love as a father made him not give up. He finally found a ray of hope, and that was to find a place with no Yin energy. With his powerful martial arts, he could turn Yin energy into Yang energy and seize the good fortune of heaven and earth. He could fight for a ray of hope for the Empyrean fairy. At that time, the Empyrean fairy did not know about this. She went out to sea with her father without a care in the world. She thought that it was a vacation and was very happy. However, when she reached the gate of heaven, she realized that something was wrong, but by then, it was too late. After traveling for several days, they could no longer see the shadow of the continent. They kept heading south, as if they were about to reach the end of the world. After experiencing several storms, the storms of nature could not do anything to them. Yi Dingdang was unable to eat and had to rely on nutrient solutions to maintain her vitality. It was heartbreaking. Yan Qingyi stayed in the cabin all day and did not leave. She had too many expectations for this trip, but also a lot of hesitation. In the past, when she used the divination technique, she had never felt like this, and she had never heard that strange voice calling her. All these signs indicated that this trip was unusual. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, she did not know. Her divination technique was derived from her understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth. It was a divine ability that descended from the heavens. Not to mention others, even she did not fully understand the mysteries behind it. The scenery was enchanting, but Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang were not in the mood to appreciate it. Seeing their daughter become thinner day by day, their hearts seemed to bleed. However, seeing their daughter's encouraging eyes was the only way to make up for it. Their daughter's strength gave them courage and supported them to move forward. Suddenly, the ship stopped and floated on the sea. Everyone walked out of the cabin and came to the deck, looking at each other. What's wrong? I don't know. Could it be that the ship broke down? In the cabin, Tang Zheng stared straight at the Empyrean ferry. She frowned deeply and looked at the endless sea through the glass, not saying a word. The others also came to the cabin and started asking questions. We lost our way. Tang Zheng explained. With such advanced technology, how could we lose our way? The others found it hard to believe. Only she knows the specific direction of the divine gate, but after all, it's been thousands of years. The sea now is quite different from 1,000 years ago. So, we lost our way. Tang Zheng was helpless. He also did not expect to encounter such a problem. The Empyrean fairy had always been very confident. There was no need to doubt her strength. Who would have thought that she would actually lose her way? Everyone looked at the Empyrean fairy. Seeing that she was silent, they did not dare to ask and could only look into the distance helplessly. It was indeed difficult to determine the direction in the vast sea with no reference point and thousands of years apart. The Empyrean fairy was silent for a moment. Then, she turned around and stared at everyone. I also don't know the direction. She had always been proud, but she could not even find the direction. She was truly ashamed. Tang Zheng's face darkened. The thing he was most worried about had happened. Now, they were like a blind person. There were so many directions, but where should they go? But he did not complain. He suppressed the chaotic thoughts in his heart and said encouragingly, "You're the only one who has been to the divine gate. Choose a direction based on your feelings." The others could not hide their disappointment and looked at her in unison. The Empyrean fairy did not argue. She directly closed her eyes and activated her mysterious technique, as if she wanted to feel that familiar aura. After a long time, she suddenly opened her eyes and pointed in a direction. Then let's go this way. This was the direction she pointed out based on her intuition. Whether it was correct or not, she did not know. She could only wait and see if the goddess of luck would descend upon them. That direction. Tang Zheng was treating a dead horse as a living horse, so he immediately agreed with Nine Heaven's profound maiden's words. The ship set sail again. With a whistle, it sailed into the distance. A few days later, a gust of wind blew over from somewhere. Yan Luyun, who was standing at the bow of the boat, subconsciously hugged his arms tightly. This journey had allowed the young master of the Yan family to experience a lot of elegance. He was extremely excited. He wished he could grow wings and fly to the divine gate as soon as possible. Why does the weather change so quickly? It was unbearably hot just a moment ago. Why does it feel like we're in a world of ice and snow now? It's so cold. Yan Luyun muttered. Aya, it's so cold. Fang Shishir just happened to walk onto the deck. She could not help but tighten her clothes. These two were not ordinary people. Usually, it was difficult for them to feel cold or hot. But today's weather caused their reactions to be so strong. It was really strange. The two looked at each other and immediately realized that something was wrong. The sky is still sunny. Why is it so cold? Yan Luyun asked curiously. Fang Shishir also nodded. She leaned on the side of the ship and stretched her head out to look. She found that the sea was still blue and there was nothing strange. Woo! A long cry came from the distance. The two of them stood up in shock. They looked up and saw a large ship sailing in the distance. Strange, how come we didn't see this ship before? Yan Luyun had been on the deck the whole time. He just looked in this direction. In this vast sea, there was no end in sight. It was impossible for a large ship to come close before they found it. Yan Luyun rubbed his eyes. He wondered if he was not paying attention and was negligent. Fang Shishir stared at the large ship and suddenly exclaimed, "Ah, look at that ship. Why does it look like an ancient ship?" Yan Luyun was shocked. He muttered in his heart. How could there be an ancient ship sailing on the sea in this modern society? This kind of thankless and incomparably dangerous thing. No idiot would do it, right? He took a closer look and found that the approaching ship was in the shape of an ancient ship. It was completely made of solid wood. There were flags fluttering on the tall mast, and there seemed to be shadows flashing on the lookout platform on the mast. Yan Luyun smacked his lips and sighed, it really is an ancient ship. Fang Shishir had already noticed that something was strange. She turned around and rushed into the cabin. After a while, the others came to the deck and stared at the large ship. The two ships were only 100 meters apart. They could even see the vicissitudes of history of the large ship. Especially the cannons on both sides of the large ship. They were definitely ancient objects. Everyone looked at each other. Shouldn't this kind of antique be displayed in a museum? Why did it come to the sea to sail? This ship is strange. Empyrean Fairy stared at the large ship and concluded. Everyone, be careful. Act according to the situation. Tang Zheng reminded. There must be a reason for this abnormality. Everyone's nerves could not help but tense up. Woo! There was another high-pitched cry. Everyone finally recognized that it was the sound of a bugle horn. It was like the bugle horn blown in an ancient battlefield. The atmosphere instantly became gloomy. There was a chill in the air. Whoosh! A cold light flew out from the large ship. Zheng! The cold light landed on their deck, and it buzzed and trembled. Everyone's pupils shrank as they stared at the cold light. It was actually an arrow. The cold light flashed and flickered with a cold aura that made people tremble. This thing is strange. Yan Luyun said in amazement. Be careful. Tang Zhen glanced at the big ship from the corner of his eyes, and suddenly discovered that dozens of cold lights soared into the sky, shooting towards the bow of their ship, so he shouted loudly. Everyone was already on high alert. Hearing Tang Zheng's warning, they all reacted. The light of their weapons flashed and the sound of clanking rang out. These cold lights were actually arrows. Although it was not 10,000 arrows, their attack power was not to be underestimated. It could be seen from the bow of the ship. Enemy attack! Tang Zheng roared and soared into the air, rushing towards the big ship. The two ships were only a few dozen meters apart, and under Tang Zheng's feet, it was as if he was walking on flat ground. He flew to the top of the big ship and looked down. Immediately, his eyes became round and almost popped out of their sockets. He shouted in disbelief, quickly come and see. This ship is too strange. Empyrean Fairy also flew up. The others did not have such powerful skills. They could only stand on their tiptoes and look up. Empyrean Fairy flew above the large ship. When she saw the scene on the ship, her reaction was similar to Tang Zheng's. Her face changed and she could not help but cry out in alarm. How did it become like this? Chapter 12:15. This ancient ship was covered in green algae and moss. The deck was slippery as if it were covered in a layer of mucus. Dozens of people in ragged clothes were standing on it. They looked up with empty eyes and stared at Tang Zheng and the Empyrean fairy in the air. The Empyrean fairy and Tang Zheng were shocked when they saw their eyes. There was nothing in their eye sockets. Their eyeballs had long since disappeared, leaving only empty eye sockets. Additionally, their heads and many other parts of their bodies revealed eerie white bones. Rotten flesh hung from many of them. Even from dozens of meters away, the sea breeze seemed to carry a fishy smell. It turned out that the ragged clothes were hiding such bodies. The two glanced at each other. Tang Zheng smacked his lips and said, "What are these?" "These are already dead, but for some reason, they can still move freely," the Empyrean fairy said thoughtfully. Tang Zheng immediately recalled the scene in the 100,000 mountains. The eerie white bones crawled out of their graves and moved freely. Their attack power could not be underestimated and was a great threat. These dead things, like the white bones, seemed to be controlled by some kind of power. "This place is strange, so we must be careful," the Empyrean fairy warned. "I'll go on the ship and see what's going on." Tang Zheng was about to dive down after saying this, but before he could do anything, a series of whooshes rang out and shot toward Tang Zheng and the Empyrean fairy. The enemy had taken the initiative to attack. Tang Zheng snorted. "A bunch of dead things dare to provoke us. I'll let you see what a real arrow is." Buzz! The bowstring vibrated as the sunshot arrow flew out. Whoosh! 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 One arrow turned into 9 and shot down at lightning speed. Clang! Clang! The enemy's arrows could not withstand a single blow and collapsed under the sunshot arrows. The shooting sun arrows instantly reached the deck and turned into streaks of cold light, shuttling between the enemies. The sound of bones being pierced rang out one after another. Pata! As long as someone was struck by the arrows, they would quickly fall to the ground and turn into pieces of bone. When the other enemies saw this, they scattered in all directions. But how could they escape the shooting sun arrows? In the blink of an eye, they were caught up. With a few thuds, they also fell to the ground in disorder. With the threat removed, Tang Zheng landed on the deck. He looked around and felt that the atmosphere was lifeless. A gust of cold wind blew, making him shudder. Tang Zheng had pure yang energy, so he was not afraid at all. He strode forward, and the deck under his feet creaked as if it would shatter at any moment. The Empyrean fairy also landed. She frowned and said, "This ship is an antique. I don't know how many years ago it sank. But the key point is that it floated up again. There must be some kind of power controlling all of this," Tang Zheng said with certainty. The Empyrean fairy also nodded, but she could not see any clues. The ship had already stopped. It was silent and there was no sign of life. Suddenly, a scream came from the distance. Tang Zheng was frightened and quickly looked over. He found that the scream came from his ship. He cursed inwardly, afraid that there was a problem. "Return to the ship," he shouted. With a tap of his feet, he flew back to his ship. The Empyrean fairy followed him like a shadow. The two of them landed on the deck and saw a group of crew members standing on the deck, trembling as they looked in the direction of the ancient ship. "What's wrong?" Tang Zheng quickly asked. "This is the Sea of Death." A crew member was frightened and uneasy as he stammered. "Sea of Death?" The others showed a doubtful expression. They were not familiar with this name. The Sea of Death is a legend that has been passed down among sailors. It is said that there is a mysterious sea above the vast sea. Once a ship enters this sea, it will lose its direction and eventually become lost in the Sea of Death. Both the ship and the people will continue to sail in the Sea of Death. There is no end and no way out. The crew member said intermittently. This ship is obviously a ship that has been lost in the Sea of Death since ancient times. It has been unable to find a way out and has been sailing in this sea over and over again. This is a curse. Moreover, it is said that after a person dies in the Sea of Death, their soul will not be reincarnated and will be imprisoned here forever. This is the cruelest punishment. Tang Zheng's head trembled as he recalled the scene he just saw. Perhaps the souls of the dead really did not reincarnate, which was why this sea had accumulated so much yin qi. Seeing the crew members' pale faces, Tang Zheng asked curiously, "Then have you heard of how this Sea of Death was formed?" The crew members looked at each other and shook their heads. "We only heard it from the older generation of crew members. We don't know the specifics of the Sea of Death." Fang Shishir said worriedly, "We entered the Sea of Death. Could it be that we will be trapped in this sea forever and can't get out?" Tang Zheng's face was gloomy as he said without thinking, "So what if it is the Sea of Death? We have more people and more power. Could it be that we are afraid of a sea?" Although the Empyrean fairy's face was solemn, she did not despair. She comforted them, "Everyone, don't worry. I will definitely take you out." They were sailing in the direction she had pointed out. Therefore, she had an unshirkable responsibility for entering the Sea of Death. Of course, she would not shirk her responsibility. She took it without hesitation. "Quickly look. What is that?" Feng Xinyang suddenly pointed into the distance and shouted. Everyone turned to look at the source of the sound, only to hear a loud rumble. A colossal object rose from the bottom of the sea, breaking through the waves and floating to the surface of the sea. Many people were dumbfounded, unable to calm down. This behemoth was a huge battleship. It looked like a modern battleship. Its mighty appearance was like a ferocious beast entrenched in the sea, breaking out from the depths of the sea. The bow of the battleship fiercely slammed into the surface of the sea, creating a wave that was several feet high. Then, the battleship turned around and fiercely charged towards the ancient ship. Pang! Following a loud sound, the ancient ship was broken into two by the battleship and quickly sank to the bottom of the sea. Hiss! Many people sucked in a breath of cold air. This battleship's style made them tremble. It was majestic, like the king of the sea. They subconsciously looked at the ship under their feet and found that compared to the battleship, they were as weak as a baby. They would definitely not be able to withstand the impact of the battleship. "Turn the rudder!" the captain shouted. The crew members seemed to have woken up from a dream and hurriedly turned the rudder to escape the battleship's route. Everyone on the deck was in a mess and screams could be heard everywhere. "Don't panic!" Tang Zheng shouted. He seemed to calm everyone down. However, facing the fear of the unknown, this group of crew members did not know the details of Tang Zheng and the others. Naturally, they were terrified. They were in a mess and did not listen to Tang Zheng's words. Yen Luyun stood out and shouted, "Don't panic. Everyone, calm down. You are all members of the Yen family. Are you all so cowardly and afraid of death?" Swish! All the crew members calmed down. Yen Liuyun's words were clearly more intimidating than Tang Zheng's. After all, these people were all members of the Yen family and recognized Yen Luyun more. Yen Liuyun's aura surged as he said in a stern voice, "The Sea of Death may be useful to others, but it is definitely useless to us. Everyone calm down and listen to my orders. I guarantee that you will be able to return home safe and sound. I, Yen Luyun, will always be with you." Seeing that even the young master of the Yen family was with them, they were mostly insignificant people. What was there to be afraid of? Thinking to this point, the fear in the hearts of the crew members gradually dissipated. They finally calmed down. Seeing the battleship rushing over, they no longer had the fear from before. Yen Luyun took a deep breath. He was also a bit panicked, but he believed in Tang Zheng's strength. Although the current situation was strange, Tang Zheng definitely had a way to get through it. This was a kind of unreserved trust. "Young Master Tang, you take command," Yen Luyun said. Tang Zheng nodded and said, "Let's avoid the battleship first." Then we'll board the battleship to investigate the situation. Yes. The captain gave the order and continued to turn the rudder, successfully avoiding the battleship. The battleship broke through the sea with a crash and rushed past the ship's previous position. The huge waves it set off seemed to be displaying its might. If they didn't manage to turn the rudder in time, they would definitely be broken in two by the battleship and follow in the footsteps of the ancient ship. The battleship's attack missed. An angry roar rang out from the battleship. The battleship suddenly turned and charged forward. Pang! With a loud bang, the cannonball on the warship was fired. A pitch-black cannonball whizzed over and smashed into the sea on the side of the ship, setting off a huge wave that was dozens of meters high. It fiercely slammed onto the deck, drenching many people like drowned rats. Tang Zheng's eyes trembled as he roared, "The cannons on the battleship can still be used. Everyone be careful." He was truly puzzled. The battleship had floated up from the bottom of the sea and had been submerged in the sea for who knew how many years. How could it still fire? None of this could be explained by science, so there was no need to waste his brain cells to investigate. Peng peng peng. After the first attack missed, another series of cannonballs whistled through the air. The captain personally steered the ship and continuously dodged. He was in danger after danger and was almost hit several times. We can't go on like this. I'll go to the battleship. Tang Zheng flew into the air. With a swoosh, the shooting sun arrow was fired at one of the cannonballs. With a boom, the cannonball was struck, but there was no smell of gunpowder. Instead, there was a plume of black smoke that flew out from the exploding cannonball. Yin energy. Tang Zheng recognized at a glance that the black smoke produced by the explosion of the cannonball was Yin energy. Tang Zheng directly rushed through the Yin energy without any abnormalities and arrived above the battleship in an instant. At the same time, the Empyrean ferry also took action. The mountain river map rose into the air and floated above everyone's heads. An invisible force shrouded the incoming cannonballs and blocked them. They fell into the sea nearby and splashed up huge waves, but no one was hurt. Chapter 12:16. Tang Zheng floated in the air, looking down at the battleship below. It was clear as day. There were hundreds of soldiers standing on the battleship. They were wearing tattered military uniforms, and it was impossible to tell which country they were from. They were the same as the people on the ancient ship from before, all of them had turned into rotten flesh and bones. They were gloomy, and their empty eye sockets were all staring at Tang Zheng. One of them, who looked like an officer, let out a mournful roar. The commander's blade in his hand pointed at Tang Zheng, as if he was giving an order. Immediately, the people on the deck screamed, the mournful sound waves soared into the sky. It was especially ear-piercing, causing people to tremble in fear. Tang Zheng snorted in disdain, "A group of dead things, how dare you be noisy in front of me, break!" Whiz! Tang Zheng swooped down, like a cannonball, and fiercely pierced into the deck. A few people jumped up and tried to attack Tang Zheng. Bang! Tang Zheng landed on the ground and ruthlessly stepped on these people's bodies, causing them to immediately shatter and scatter all over the ground. Tang Zheng crushed the soles of his feet, and a pile of white ashes sank deep into the deck. When the others saw this, they were not afraid at all. Instead, they roared fiercely, and their empty eye sockets seemed to shoot out a dark light, which was extremely terrifying. Tang Zheng did not mind. He held the shooting sun arrows and heaven-shocking bow in his hands, and roared, "Go!" Whiz! With a piercing sound, the shooting sun arrow turned into a ray of light and disappeared from the bowstring. Then, it flew into the crowd like a clap of thunder. Immediately, one could only see people falling down one after another silently. A chilling murderous aura assaulted their faces. In an instant, the shooting sun arrows swept through a large area, and all of them turned into broken bones, with Tang Zheng as the center, covering the ground. The commander hid behind the crowd and continued to clamor, which was especially ear-piercing. Tang Zheng stared, locking onto the other party. He rushed over with large strides. The shooting sun arrow left his hand once again. The 9 arrows merged into one, and quickly flew in one direction. its speed was so fast that it could not be seen, and did not even leave behind an afterimage. With the shooting sun arrows leading the way, Tang Zheng followed behind them as if there was no one around. As soon as the shooting sun arrows came into contact with the people in front of him, they fell to the ground and turned into pieces. The commander kept retreating, as if he was also afraid. But it was too late. How could he escape the shooting sun arrows? The shooting sun arrows firmly enveloped him, making it impossible for him to retreat. There was no way out. In the next second, the shooting sun arrow was about to shoot into his head. However, the shooting sun arrow stopped right in front of his forehead, just a hair's breadth away from him. If it had moved a little bit further, it would have pierced right in, ending his life in an instant. Tang Zheng came in front of him and grabbed his head. He had no room to resist and could only let Tang Zheng do whatever he wanted. "Who are you?" Tang Zheng roared in a low voice as he questioned. The other party looked at him with empty eye sockets and roared like an angry lion, but he didn't say a complete sentence. Tang Zheng frowned. He felt a steady stream of yin energy passing from the top of his head to his palm. It seemed to want to drill into his meridians, but it couldn't break through his defense and could only linger in his palm. "It seems that you don't have real intelligence. You're really a dead thing," Tang Zheng said disappointedly. As soon as his voice fell, he let go of his hand. At the same time, with a bang, the head immediately exploded into a pile of powder. When the others saw that the commander had been killed, their angry voices almost became a tide, trying to drown out Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng smiled faintly and walked forward. With a point of his finger, the shooting sun arrows automatically flew up. It was as if they were his arms. They were telepathically connected and shuttled through the crowd. Not long after, everyone fell to the deck. Not a single enemy could stand up. A gust of wind blew up from the surface of the sea, carrying with it the yin energy on the deck of the ship as it rose into the air and merged with the seawater. The battleship stopped. Tang Zheng stood at the bow and looked at the people on his ship. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing that Tang Zheng alone had swept away the enemies on the battleship, this showed that they weren't completely at a disadvantage. Of course, the ordinary crew deeply understood Tang Zheng's strength. They couldn't help but secretly admire him. "Good." A cheer sounded from the crew, as if giving them courage. Thunderous cheers rose and fell one after another. "Gulyalu." A bubbling sound quietly sounded and fell into Tang Zheng's ears. He quickly looked down and found that the sea seemed to be half boiling. Bubbles appeared one after another. The bubbles burst, releasing clouds of black gas, little by little rising into the air. A dense fog rose above the sea. The others also discovered this and cried out in alarm. "What's going on?" The sea was boiling. Even the experienced crew had never seen such a scene before. They were all shocked. Tang Zheng leaped up and jumped back to his own ship from the battleship. He stood with everyone and asked, "Does everyone know what's going on?" No one answered. The Empyrean fairy also fell into silence. She stared blankly at the boiling sea with a strange expression. Tang Zheng didn't disturb her. Instead, he comforted the others and asked them to calm down. They had seen Tang Zheng's extraordinary ability and were very happy with his comfort. Their panic was relieved. The sea was boiling more and more violently. The bubbling sound seemed to come from the bottom of people's hearts. It was like the boiling of people's blood, giving people a very strange and uncomfortable feeling. Voila! The seawater automatically parted to two sides, opening up a huge fissure. It was so dark that it was impossible to see what was inside the fissure, but the fissure was like a monster opening its mouth, as if it wanted to swallow everything on the surface of the sea. "Is there a demon beast?" Tang Zheng recalled his previous experience and couldn't help but think. How can it be a demon beast? The inner demon's voice sounded. "This sea is a bit strange. I can't see through it. In my time, everyone was on the continent. Very few people would go to the sea. Therefore, I know nothing about the Sea of Death. But there is one thing. The yin qi in the sea of death is too strong. I don't know how many people have died here. Hearing the inner demons refuting the judgment of the demon beast but couldn't see through it, their mood couldn't help but become heavier. Even with the inner demon's knowledge and cultivation, they couldn't see through this sea. This place was really strange. The crack on the sea became bigger and bigger. It was like the sea opening its mouth to swallow the world. The water flowed into the crack like a waterfall. It was unknown how high it was. The battleship followed the water flow and flowed into the crack. With a loud bang, the battleship fell into the crack. Only the sound of cracking could be heard. Everyone guessed that this steel battleship had probably been smashed into smithereens, broken into pieces. The steel battleship that could ride the wind and break the waves couldn't withstand a single blow from this power. Humans were especially small. Back off. There was no need for Tang Zheng's command. The captain had already issued a command. He turned on all the power and spared no effort to retreat. He only wanted to get as far away from the crack as possible. But the power of the water flow was too great. It was so great that even modern ships couldn't resist it. Even if they turned on all the power, there was no way to retreat. They could only watch as they got closer and closer to the crack. It wouldn't be long before they followed in the footsteps of the steel battleship and were smashed into pieces. Not to mention the people on the ship. Perhaps a few experts could come out unscathed, but the rest of the crew would be in danger. How could Tang Zheng watch these people die? He was the one who brought them here. He had the obligation and responsibility to bring them back safe and sound. He was just about to open Sumeru World and take in all the crew members so that they could escape this disaster. But then he saw the Empyrean fairy suddenly raise her head. As if waking up from a dream, her eyes lit up. She stared at the crack and shouted, "Don't act rashly." Tang Zheng unconsciously stopped his movements and curiously looked at her and asked, "What's wrong?" The Empyrean fairy muttered to herself, "This feeling is becoming more and more familiar." She stared fixedly at the crack and the flowing water. She had never seen such a scene before, but there was a mysterious familiarity in her heart. It was very strange. But she was willing to take the risk and trust her intuition. Thus, she stopped Tang Zheng. Everyone looked at her curiously, wondering what new discovery she had made. They quietly waited for her to continue, but there was no explanation. Everyone's hearts were in their mouths again. Tang Zheng couldn't help but ask, "How do you feel?" The Empyrean fairy didn't say anything else. She just stared at the crack with her eyes fixed on it. Tang Zheng had no choice but to take action. But due to his trust in the Empyrean fairy, he suppressed this impulse. But as they approached the crack, the atmosphere became particularly somber. Everyone's breathing became heavy. On the verge of death, everyone's reactions were completely different. Some were crying, some were laughing, and some were throwing tantrums. But those close to Tang Zheng didn't have much of a reaction. They only looked at Tang Zheng. As long as he gave the order, they would act accordingly. They trusted Tang Zheng completely. Among them, Yan Qingyi's expression was the calmest. There wasn't even the slightest ripple. Although she wasn't as powerful as the others, her conviction was incomparably firm. Few people could compare to her. In her prophecy, she had seen these people standing in front of the giant divine gate. Thus, she was fearless and believed that the crisis before them couldn't completely defeat them. The ship had been pulled to the edge of the crack. The rumbling water flowed down, striking the souls over and over again. Many people were trembling from the depths of their souls. Tang Zheng was also a little anxious. After all, if he didn't take action now, it would really be too late. But the Empyrean fairy's determined look made him not dare to act rashly. He was deeply afraid of disrupting her plan. But she was so mysterious and didn't explain clearly. It was hard to guess what was true and what was false. This feeling was really uncomfortable. "Okay, then I choose to believe you. I hope you won't disappoint me," Tang Zheng said. He simply gave up on counterattacking and stared at the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy looked at the crack in the water, her eyes brightening. Chapter 12:17. Seeing that the ship had reached the edge of the chasm and was about to fall into the bottomless chasm, many people's faces turned pale. The courage and composure that they had just regained were all gone. Tang Zheng took a deep breath and finally couldn't help but shout, "Fu Yao!" Amidst his shout, the others tightly gripped the ship's railing and gritted their teeth. Their eyes couldn't help but reveal a look of despair. The Empyrean fairy remained motionless like a statue. Her eyes emitted a dazzling light like resplendent stars, so bright that no one dared to look directly at them. Suddenly, her cherry lips parted slightly and the corners of her mouth blossomed with pleasant surprise. She shouted, "Don't be impatient, we're saved." As if to fulfill her words, with a rumble, a huge wave surged out from the crevice shrouded in dense mist. It was dozens of meters tall and seemed to have erupted from the bottom of the sea. The seawater flowed backwards, counteracting the force of the downwards flow. The ship immediately came to a stop. Under everyone's watchful eyes, something floated up from the crevice. In front of this thing, the battleship from before was like a tiny dot. This was a towering mountain rising from the bottom of the sea, with the seawater parting on its own. Hiss! The crowd stared fixedly at this scene and gasped. The battleship was already shocking enough, but this mountain rising from the bottom of the sea made them unable to find any words to describe it. What is this? Question marks appeared in their minds one after another, but no one could answer. Tang Zheng's eyes were also filled with suspicion and shock. This sudden change made him unable to guess what was going to happen, and it was impossible for him to predict what was going to happen. But when he saw the Empyrean fairy's reaction, he couldn't help but ask, "Empyrean fairy, do you recognize this mountain?" A mountain peak floating on the surface of the sea was already extraordinary, but the Nine Heavens' profound maiden seemed to be very excited, as if she knew this mountain peak, causing Tang Zheng to mutter to himself. The Empyrean fairy looked straight ahead and said, "Of course I know it, this is the destination we've been looking for." Destination? Tang Zheng was suspicious. A light flashed through his mind. "You mean the gate of heaven?" The Empyrean fairy smiled and nodded slightly. "Of course, other than the Elysium, what else is there?" "Elysium?" Tang Zheng looked up, but he didn't see the door that Yan Qingyi had drawn. He only saw towering mountains that seemed to reach into the clouds. "This is the gate of heaven." The Empyrean fairy pointed at the mountain and jumped from the deck to the mountain. The mountain was verdant and lush. It was hard to believe that it actually floated up from the bottom of the sea. The others looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Yan Qingyi walked up to Tang Zheng and said, "What are you waiting for?" As if waking up from a dream, Tang Zheng hurriedly turned around and returned to the cabin. He picked up Yi Dingdang and glanced at the others. "We'll go up the mountain. The crew will stay. Is there no danger?" The crew members were trembling with fear. Seeing the Empyrean fairy walk up the mountain without looking back, Tang Zheng said thoughtfully, "Everyone, don't worry. There won't be any danger. The crack has already been filled up by the mountain and the water flow has stabilized." The crew members didn't refute. They just looked at the others in shock. Yi Tianlei and the others naturally wouldn't stay on the ship. They all jumped off the ship. Yan Qingyi didn't know martial arts. Yan Luyun brought her up the mountain and the group chased after the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy walked for a while before stopping. She looked up at the towering mountain. The others caught up with her and asked curiously, "The gate of heaven is in this mountain. Why is it so different from what you've seen before?" From the Empyrean fairy's reaction, they could tell that she had never seen the Sea of Death before. That meant that it was very different from the last time she came to the gate of heaven. That was why Tang Zheng asked this question. The Empyrean fairy said in a deep voice, "When I saw this mountain, I understood everything. The reason why I didn't see the Sea of Death when I saw the gate of heaven was because the Sea of Death was created by the gate of heaven." "Is that so?" Everyone's hearts trembled. They couldn't believe it. The world changes. Anything can happen. The gate of heaven is a place of absolute een. Over time, this area of the sea has been affected and turned into the Sea of Death. Any ship that passes by will be imprisoned in the Sea of Death. It's difficult to escape. This is the danger of a place of absolute een. The Empyrean fairy explained without stopping. Everyone fell into deep thought. They gradually understood. If a place of absolute een is so dangerous, what will we encounter? Fang Shishir asked curiously. The Empyrean fairy glanced at her and said, "Things have changed. We didn't encounter too much danger back then, but it's hard to say now." Everyone's heart sank. It seemed that this trip would really be dangerous. If the Sea of Death could be created, this mountain would definitely have unknown dangers. Everyone, be careful. I'll be at the front. If there's any movement, I'll definitely warn everyone. The Empyrean fairy said dutifully as she walked at the front. Follow closely. Don't fall behind. Tang Zheng reminded. He carried Yi Dingdang and walked forward. He was half a body's length behind the Empyrean fairy. His eyes were on the 6 directions and his ears were on the alert. Boom! A loud sound rang out. The ground beneath their feet shook violently. Everyone stopped in their tracks at the same time and looked around. The loud sound rang out again. It was like the sound of footsteps. It came from afar and approached, shaking everyone's hearts. What is it? Yen Luyun cried out in alarm, but his face was flushed red, and his heart was excited. This was a combination of fear and excitement. He wanted to come out on an adventure to see the new world and new things. But when he heard those loud sounds, his blood seemed to be trembling. The Empyrean fairy gazed at a nearby mountain peak with a burning gaze. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. She tapped the ground lightly with the tip of her foot and flew out like a bolt of lightning. Boom! Another loud sound rang out as a gigantic creature walked out from behind the mountain peak and entered everyone's line of sight. A giant. This word immediately popped up in everyone's minds. However, Tang Zheng had a different idea in his heart. This giant was not made of flesh and blood, but a stone giant. Its entire body was made of stone, and it was over 100 meters tall. In front of it, humans were insignificant, extremely tiny. A stone turning into a human didn't give everyone too much of a shock. It was just that the giant's body was somewhat intimidating. There was no doubt that the Empyrean fairy had never seen this stone giant before. It must have been born later. Looking at its huge body, its combat power couldn't be underestimated. The fairy of the 9 heavens rushed forward fearlessly. The painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale flew out from her hand and suspended in midair. A gust of wind swept out from the painting and wrapped around the giant. Boom! The giant staggered a few steps. The tall trees around it were trampled under its feet and turned into debris. The giant waved its fist and tore through the gust of wind. It rushed out of the encirclement. It raised its head and opened its mouth as if it was roaring silently at the mountain river map. The Empyrean maiden frowned when she saw that her attack had failed to injure her opponent. She cast another spell, and a huge stream of water gushed out from the painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale. It was as if the water of the Milky Way was pouring down on the giant's head. Under the impact of so many water droplets, the giant bent down and supported itself with its hands on the ground, resisting with difficulty. Bang! Finally, the giant couldn't bear it and fell on its knees, creating a large pit. Smoke and dust rose and the ground trembled. The Empyrean fairy said with a stern expression, "How dare you stir up trouble in the divine gate left behind by my father? If I don't kill you, I'm not the Emperor of Heaven's daughter." Swoosh! The mountain river map shone brightly and once again, something glittering with cold light fell. Ice blades! Everyone saw it clearly. The mountain river map was all-encompassing and its attacks were endless. The ice blades hit the giant's body and left white marks. The giant couldn't even raise its head. This storm-like continuous attack made the giant unable to resist at all. When the others saw the Empyrean fairy's true strength, they were shocked. Yen Luyun smacked his lips and exclaimed, "This is an expert." This subverted his understanding once again. He was already considered experienced and knowledgeable, but what he saw and heard this time opened the door to a new world in front of him. Don't worry, the giant is no match for the Empyrean fairy. Tang Zheng's eyesight was better than others, so of course, he understood everything. As soon as he finished speaking, the giant was completely prostrated on the ground. He no longer had the strength to resist. He hung his head dejectedly and stared at the fairy of the 9 heavens and the painting of mountains and rivers. The Empyrean fairy landed and stood in front of the giant. Her body was as small as an ant, and the giant was like an elephant. However, the giant submitted at her feet and didn't dare to act rashly. "What are you?" the Empyrean fairy asked with an ashen face. The giant opened its mouth, but no sound came out. "So it's just a useless thing." The Empyrean fairy shook her head and said regretfully. The others also caught up and looked at the giant at close range. One could imagine the shock in their hearts. "What do we do now?" Tang Zheng asked. The Empyrean fairy looked behind the mountain peak and said, "There must be more dangerous things behind. Just be careful. As for this thing." The Empyrean fairy pondered for a moment, then rushed out with a swoosh and hit the giant's chest with her fist. The thin fist was insignificant compared to the giant's body, but the power that burst out of the fist was enough to split mountains. There was a loud bang, and from the center of the giant's heart, cracks quickly spread in all directions, covering the giant's entire body in an instant. Ka-cha! The giant shattered, turning into giant rocks that scattered all over the ground. It no longer had the awe-inspiring aura it had before. The Empyrean fairy clapped her hands and walked through the rubble, heading deeper into the mountain. The others looked at each other, then came to and followed her. The air was filled with an austere aura, as if there was an invisible pressure pressing down on everyone's hearts. Even their breathing became heavy. Looking at the unfathomable mountain and the endless dense forest, no one had any confidence in their hearts. They didn't know what was waiting for them. Chapter 12:18. After walking for some distance, both sides were quiet. Other than the sound of their footsteps, there was no other sound. It was a dead silence that made one's hair stand on end. They went around the towering mountain peak and came to the depths of the mountain. The Empyrean maiden stopped in her tracks, and so did the others. They all looked up and stared ahead with burning eyes. A huge stone door stood in front of them. "Heaven's Gate!" Tang Zheng subconsciously shouted. He couldn't help but remember what the 5-clawed golden dragon said before. The Heaven's Gate was a secret place of the Fu clan. It was said that it hid a huge secret and countless treasures. If he could enter the Heaven's Gate and obtain these, he could become the new Emperor of Heaven. Besides, Ji Wuxiang also had bad intentions towards the Heaven's Gate. The Heaven's Gate was a place of absolute Yin, and it was also the Fu clan's hunting ground. The fact that the Empyrean fairy was willing to share it showed that she was open-minded. Now that he had the chance to enter the Heaven's Gate, other than saving Yi Dingdang, he could also see the wonders of the Heaven's Gate. Of course, he never expected to be able to see through the secrets of the Heaven's Gate and become the new Emperor of Heaven. The others stared at the Heaven's Gate and sighed in amazement. Is this the Heaven's Gate? It's so majestic, so extraordinary. The Empyrean fairy's eyes also became passionate. All kinds of emotions surged in her heart. Too many memories appeared in the depths of her mind like a movie. She had been pampered since she was young and lived a carefree life. Her father brought her across the ocean to the Heaven's Gate. When she saw the Heaven's Gate, she was shocked and asked what it was. The Emperor of Heaven didn't answer her. He only brought her through the giant door. What happened next completely overturned her worldview, causing her to be imprisoned here for over 1,000 years. After traveling through time and space for over 1,000 years, she escaped and left Heaven's Gate. However, when she returned to the continent, everything changed. The Celestial Emperor disappeared and became a legend. In addition, she had also heard rumors about the Heaven's Gate. It was said that the Heaven's Gate was a secret place of the Fu clan, and once one found the Heaven's Gate, he could become the new Emperor of Heaven. After the Empyrean fairy recovered from her shock, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, she also understood the Emperor of Heaven's painstaking efforts. The Emperor of Heaven imprisoned her not to harm her, but to save her. The Emperor of Heaven had used his great divine ability to fuse the pure Yin energy in the Gate of Heaven with the pure Yin energy in her body. In the end, he had reached the realm of extreme Yin, giving birth to Yang, thus pulling her back from the gates of hell. When the Emperor of Heaven imprisoned her and left her alone in the Gate of Heaven, she was filled with despair and anger. She hated the Emperor of Heaven to the bone. After that, she finally understood the Emperor of Heaven's good intentions after thousands of years had passed. Since then, her personality had changed greatly. She was no longer unruly and arrogant. She had even become humble and kind. This was a quality that she absolutely did not have in the past. Since then, she had never stepped into the Gate of Heaven again. She was completely unaware of all these changes. Revisiting this place, all sorts of feelings welled up in her heart. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Looking at her strange expression, Tang Jing asked, "What's wrong with you?" The Empyrean fairy came back to her senses and shook her head, "It's nothing. Along the way, we haven't encountered any other dangers. This means that there isn't any danger. There shouldn't be any danger in the Gate of Heaven either," Tang Jing said thoughtfully. The Empyrean fairy was slightly startled. She hesitantly said, "Perhaps." Perhaps? She couldn't give a definite answer. When he revisited his old haunts, he found that everything had changed drastically. In the past, the Gate of Heaven floated in the sea like an immortal mountain island. Now, it had sunk to the bottom of the sea, causing this part of the sea to become the Sea of Death. All these changes made it impossible for her to figure out the specific changes and current situation of the Gate of Heaven. Tang Jing opened his mouth, but couldn't say a word. His heart gradually sank. The Empyrean fairy couldn't determine the changes in the Gate of Heaven. Didn't that mean that there was a possibility that changes had also occurred in the land of Absolute Yin, which delayed the rescue of Yi Dingdang? He lowered his head and looked at Yi Dingdang's eyes. There was a glimmer of hope in them. Yi Dingdang also didn't want to die. She wanted to continue staying by Tang Zheng's side. Especially after seeing the Gate of Heaven, her survival instincts became even stronger. "Dingdang, I will definitely cure you so that you can always stay by my side." Tang Zheng secretly gritted his teeth and silently made up his mind. Yan Qingyi looked at the Gate of Heaven with an excited expression. She subconsciously wanted to reach out and touch the Gate of Heaven. She muttered to herself, "It's this scene, it's this scene." This was the scene she had foreseen. However, the voice that guided her did not appear in her mind. Therefore, in addition to her excitement, there was also a trace of regret and melancholy in her expression. "Come, let's go in." The Empyrean fairy took the lead and walked to the front of the Gate of Heaven. She stretched out her finger and a drop of bright red blood spurted out from her fingertip. Her finger slowly approached the Gate of Heaven. Finally, the tip of her finger came into close contact with the Gate of Heaven. With the tip of her finger as a dot, the blood quickly spread in all directions. It was like veins, and in the blink of an eye, it covered the entire Gate of Heaven. The Gate of Heaven glowed with a red light. It was like a rosy cloud, enveloping the surroundings of the Gate of Heaven. Everyone was stunned. They all widened their eyes and stared at this scene. Tang Zheng's hand that was hugging Yi Dingdang tightened involuntarily. He looked at the red light excitedly. He suddenly realized why the five-clawed golden dragon said that the Fu clan was required to open the Gate of Heaven. It turned out that the Fu clan's bloodline was required. This drop of the Empyrean fairy's blood contained the power of the Fu clan's bloodline inheritance. It was the key to opening the Gate of Heaven. This was a restriction set by the Emperor of Heaven, Fuxi. No one else could break it. The capillary-like thin lines completely covered the Gate of Heaven. The Gate of Heaven seemed to come alive. It moved backwards bit by bit. With a rumbling sound, a crack appeared in the gate of heaven. The gate of heaven opened. The crack became bigger and bigger. There was no light behind the gate of heaven. Instead, it was darkness. The deep darkness was filled with a terrifying power that could take one's soul away. No one dared to look inside. It was as if they looked, their eyeballs would sink into it and they would not be able to pull themselves out. Everyone became more and more excited. They did not even dare to blink as they stared at the gate of heaven. The Empyrean fairy continued to cast her spell. The meridians on the gate of heaven completely released their power. The gate of heaven slowly opened. After a few minutes, the gate of heaven opened completely. The darkness rushed towards them as if it was going to swallow the gate of heaven and earth. Everyone looked away with difficulty. They looked at each other, not knowing what to do. The Empyrean fairy stopped casting her spell. She pointed to the back of the gate of heaven and said, "This is the back of the gate of heaven. To save her, we must enter the gate of heaven. The pure energy here will be the purest. It will be the best for nourishing her body and soul and rejuvenating her vitality." Tang Zheng nodded. He carried Yi Ding Dang and strode in without hesitation. Chapter 12:19. The darkness behind the divine gate was so dark that they could not even see their own fingers, but it was not a problem for them. The Empyrean fairy pointed her finger at the void, and a ball of primordial fire rose from her fingertip and floated in mid-air, illuminating the surroundings. Everyone widened their eyes and turned their heads to look, only to find that the divine gate was unfathomably huge, and the fire could not illuminate the entire area. The divine gate has always been this huge, no need to make a fuss. The Empyrean fairy understood their thoughts and explained. Everyone nodded and put away their thoughts, and followed the Empyrean fairy into the depths of the divine gate. The darkness gave them a lot of psychological pressure, and some of them could not help but breathe heavily. The thumping of their footsteps in the spacious divine gate was particularly ear-piercing, adding to the invisible pressure. "How far is it?" Tang Zheng asked. The Empyrean fairy did not turn her head and said, "Although the divine gate is a place of absolute yin, but in terms of absorbing pure yin energy to save people, the divine bed is the core of the divine gate. The pure yin energy on it is rich enough, so it can save twice the effort and increase the success rate." Divine bed? Tang Zheng raised his voice in surprise. Yes, the divine bed is the core of the divine gate, and it gathers all the pure yin energy in the divine gate. The Empyrean fairy added. Back then, she had to absorb pure yin energy to save herself, and this time, she had to lie on the divine bed for hundreds and thousands of years. She had a deep understanding of the magical properties of the divine bed. Suddenly, a golden light flashed on Tang Zheng's arm, and the five-clawed golden dragon's voice rang out. "It is said that the divine gate contains many treasures of the Fu clan, and once you obtain these items, you may become the new Emperor of Heaven, is that right?" Tang Zheng was shocked by the five-clawed golden dragon's sudden question, but he forcibly suppressed his curiosity. After all, he was here to save people. The five-clawed golden dragon was different. The dragon clan had a strong interest in treasures, and now that he had come to the divine gate, he knew about the rumors of the divine gate, so he asked without hesitation. The five-clawed golden dragon was fearless. He didn't care if the Empyrean fairy turned hostile. As expected, the Empyrean fairy stopped in her tracks and turned around. She stared at Tang Zheng's arm that was shining with a golden light and said with an unkind expression, "You're still thinking about the Elysium?" The five-clawed golden dragon did not deny it either. He said with a dignified face, "The gate of heaven is a legendary treasure land. I can peek into its mysteries. Of course, I won't miss such a good opportunity." Although these words were tactful, the meaning was very clear. It was really tempted. Of course, unless the treasure was extremely extraordinary, it would not really make a move. "Five-clawed golden dragon, don't be rude," Tang Zheng scolded with an unkind expression. The five-clawed golden dragon was afraid of Tang Zheng and did not dare to make a sound. The Empyrean fairy sneered and said meaningfully, "Five-clawed golden dragon, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Although there are rumors outside that there are treasures hidden in the gate of heaven, I want to tell you the truth. The gate of heaven is only a place with no yin energy. There are definitely no treasures like you said. When the Empyrean fairy woke up, she ran through almost every corner of the gate of heaven. If there were treasures, she would have found them long ago. How could anyone else have a chance to find them? As for the rumors outside, she did not know where they came from. In her opinion, they were all nonsense and extremely absurd. However, she was too lazy to explain. These people had coveted the gate of heaven for a long time and could not find it. Why waste her saliva to explain? Tang Zheng's curiosity was aroused. He stared at the Empyrean fairy with a burning gaze, as if he wanted to distinguish the truth of her words. However, after looking for a long time, he could not see the reason. The five-clawed golden dragon's voice sounded in his mind. He snorted and said, "She's lying. She's deceiving everyone. Don't be fooled by her." Tang Zheng did not express his opinion. The inner demons suddenly said, "This gate of heaven is indeed a good place. The pure yin energy is dense and is definitely stronger than the previous mountain with the life totem." Tang Zheng suddenly had an idea and said, "Since the pure yin energy is so strong, then can't I also absorb the pure yin energy here and neutralize the pure yang energy?" Previously, Tang Zheng's heart was tied to Yi Ding Dang. When he heard about the miraculous gate of heaven, he did not think that he could absorb the pure yin energy. Now that success was in sight, he suddenly had this idea. "Hee, you're finally enlightened." The inner demons praised. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. "Why didn't you remind me before? Last time I absorbed so much pure yang energy that my body almost exploded. With such a great opportunity to save my life, you actually didn't give me any advice." He was quite depressed. He had worried for nothing for so long. You really think too simply. Is a place of extreme yin that easy to find? If it wasn't for the Empyrean fairy, where would we find a place of extreme yin? The inner demons retorted. Tang Zheng was suddenly startled. He realized that he had been too impatient and had wrongly blamed the inner demons. Moreover, absorbing pure yin energy in a place of extreme yin is not that simple. Do you think it's as easy as absorbing pure yin energy from other women? The inner demon's question caused Tang Zheng to fall into deep thought. Could it be that he had thought too simply? The inner demon seemed to have seen through his thoughts and added, "You really are thinking too simply. How can absorbing pure yin energy be that easy? You must rely on a medium." Medium? What is it? Tang Zheng's curiosity was completely aroused. The pure yin energy in this place of extreme yin was born from the creation of heaven and earth. If a person wanted to absorb the pure yin energy here, they must draw upon the yin and yang energy of heaven and earth to succeed. Draw upon the yin and yang energy? Tang Zheng was startled. Ding Dang wants to absorb the pure yin energy in the gate of heaven. Does she also need to draw upon the yin and yang energy? Of course. If not, how could she succeed? Then how can I draw upon the yin and yang energy? The inner demons kept him in suspense and said mysteriously, "Heaven's secrets cannot be revealed. When the time is right, I will naturally tell you." Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and thought that they were deliberately mystifying things. However, the inner demons deliberately kept him in suspense, so he didn't continue to ask. In short, the inner demons would tell him away. They wouldn't really let him come here for nothing. The Empyrean fairy saw that the five-clawed golden dragon was no longer talking, so she didn't say anything else. Just as she was about to turn around, she heard a gust of wind coming from the depths of the gate of heaven. She was startled and shouted, "Be careful." The others also noticed this and were on high alert. Tang Zheng raised the holy shield to protect Yi Ding Dang in his arms, Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang protected Fang Shishir, and Yan Luyun protected Yan Qingyi. All of them stared at the darkness in front of them with burning eyes. Whoosh! A strong gust of wind blew, as if something huge was flying towards them. Go! The Empyrean fairy pointed her finger at the void, and the true fire quickly flew out. It turned into a streak of fire and collided with the incoming enemy. Roar! A sharp roar rang out, and the true fire illuminated a huge silhouette. It was a demonic beast with huge wings, and it looked like a bat. In this dark and gloomy environment, there were definitely no lack of creatures like bats. After being nourished by the pure energy for a long time, it had become like this. Tang Zheng's guess was not wrong. This was indeed an evolved bat demonic beast. Bats were social animals, and there was definitely more than one of them. Tang Zheng suddenly realized this and reminded them loudly, "This is a bat demonic beast, and I'm afraid there is more than one. Everyone, be careful." He did not know the specific dangers of the bat demonic beast, so he could only remind them loudly. Bats were afraid of fire, but this bat demonic beast was not afraid of the true fire. It actually rushed towards the true fire. After colliding with the true fire quickly ignited it, and it turned into a ball of flame, dancing in the air, and its shrill cries resounded through the gate of heaven. Whoosh! 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 In an instant, a strong gust of wind blew in front of them, like a tornado, sweeping out from the depths of the gate of heaven. The terrifying pressure made everyone unconsciously nervous. A large group of bat demonic beasts is coming. The Empyrean fairy shouted. She pointed her finger at the void, and the true fire appeared between her fingers, interweaving into a fire net in the air. Puff! 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 The strong wind blew and extinguished many flames, but the power of the fire net was still not to be underestimated. Many bat demonic beasts crashed into the fire net and immediately turned into balls of flame, fleeing in all directions and screaming. However, there were too many bat demonic beasts, and the fire net was eventually broken through. In an instant, a dark mass of bat demonic beasts flew over, and a foul smell hit them, making it difficult to breathe. The Empyrean fairy stood in front of everyone and roared, "A group of beasts, how dare you occupy my gate of heaven? All of you, die." As soon as she finished speaking, a ball of light flew from her hand and floated in the air. It was the stately painting. The stately painting suddenly rolled up like a bag with a big opening. The bat demonic beasts at the front were immediately sucked into the stately painting. Seeing this, the other bat demonic beasts retreated. However, it was too late. The fairy of the 9 heavens was enraged. The painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale danced in the air, immediately sweeping up a large group of demonic bat beasts. Without a sound, these demonic bat beasts disappeared. The painting of mounts and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale was another world. Once one was sucked into it, one would be at the mercy of the fairy of the 9 heavens. There was a world of difference between the strength of these bat demons and the fairy of the 9 heavens, so they were easily sucked into the painting. "Let's see where you can run to." The Empyrean fairy's mind moved, and all the bat demonic beasts in the gate of heaven were sucked into the stately painting, and there was no longer a trace of mournful cries. When the others saw this scene, they all breathed a sigh of relief. The bat demonic beasts looked particularly scary, especially when there were so many of them. If it was an ordinary person, it would take a lot of effort to defeat so many. However, this was not a problem for the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy put away the stately painting and let the true fire soar into the sky to light up the path ahead. She said loudly and clearly, "Let's go. I want to see what else is occupying the gate of heaven." The gate of heaven was the place where she had lived for hundreds and thousands of years. It was also a relic left to her by the Emperor of Heaven. It was extremely important to her, and she would not allow others to touch it, especially a group of demonic beasts. Chapter 12:20. The sudden burst of light attracted everyone's attention. Under everyone's watchful eyes, they discovered that the light came from the pearls embedded in the dome. The soft light completely cooled this part of the world, leaving nothing to hide. "Ah!" Feng Shishi's pupils shrank as she instinctively cried out in alarm. The others also involuntarily sucked in a breath of cold air, because as far as their eyes could see, an extremely frightening thing was entrenched not far away. It raised its head high and looked down at them condescendingly. Those 2 huge eyeballs were like 2 flickering lights, causing people to shudder. "Snake!" This was a huge snake. Its huge body was entrenched in front of them, and there was actually a horn on its forehead. Tang Zheng had seen a similar monster in the 100,000 Mountains. It was a snake that evolved into a flood dragon. It was the easiest place to breed these things. Previously, there was a bat monster, so it wasn't too strange to see a flood dragon. The Empyrean fairy strolled towards the flood dragon with an unfriendly expression. She scolded, "Get down here." Hiss. The flood dragon spat out its red tongue, its eyes revealing an ominous glint. It sized up the Empyrean fairy from head to toe, as if it was evaluating her battle strength. "Get down from the heavenly bed. How dare a beast like you occupy the heavenly bed?" Heavenly bed? Everyone's pupils shrank as they looked down at the flood dragon's huge body. There was indeed the shape of a bed faintly discernible. Could that be the heavenly bed? The flood dragon was entrenched on the heavenly bed, absorbing the pure Yin energy on the heavenly bed. No wonder it transformed into a flood dragon. Inner demons, didn't you say that humans can't directly absorb pure Yin energy? It can only be done by using the power of Yin and Yang. Why can this thing? Tang Zheng asked suspiciously. The inner demons clicked his tongue and said, "Humans are the spirit of all things, but they also have their limits. All things in the world have their own characteristics and advantages. Other creatures naturally have advantages that humans don't have. Do you understand?" Tang Zheng seemed to understand but didn't. This is what it means for all living things to be equal. No one species can have all the advantages. That would be a great injustice, something that is impossible to happen, the inner demons patiently added. Tang Zheng finally understood. No wonder there was an ancient saying that all living things were equal. This sentence contained the truth of the great Tao, but ordinary people would not be able to discover the mystery behind it. This flood dragon stayed in Heaven's Gate for a long time. Over time, it absorbed the pure Yin energy and gained sentience. Then, it cultivated bit by bit until it finally reached its current level. Unfortunately, its good days have come to an end. The inner demons said. Looking at the Empyrean fairy's angry look, Tang Zheng also understood that the flood dragon's good days were over. The Empyrean fairy rarely showed such anger. This bed must be very important to her, otherwise, she would not have such a big reaction. The Empyrean fairy tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and gracefully flew to the top of the flood dragon's head, aiming for the protruding horn. Whoosh! A puff of green smoke came out of the flood dragon's mouth and flew directly towards the Empyrean fairy. It obviously realized the danger and fought back with all its might. Insignificant skill. The fairy of the 9 heavens didn't care. A gust of wind flew out from the painting of mountains and rivers and immediately wrapped around the green smoke. There was no doubt that the green smoke was highly toxic and couldn't come into contact with it. The green smoke was blown away and the Empyrean fairy's kick landed on the flood dragon's head. Bang! The horn on the flood dragon's head flashed with a faint light and collided with the kick. The huge force sent the flood dragon flying off the bed and landing heavily on the ground far away before it stopped. Roar! The flood dragon roared angrily and swept its huge tail towards the Empyrean fairy's head. The Empyrean fairy landed on the bed and looked down at the sweeping tail. She frowned and growled, "Go away." Of course, the flood dragon would not go away by itself. Its huge tail continued to sweep down like rolling thunder with terrifying power. The fairy of the 9 heavens stood firmly on the celestial bed. With a thought, a rock as big as a mountain fell from the painting of mountains and rivers. Bang! The rock hit the flood dragon's huge tail and crushed it under the huge rock. The flood dragon kept struggling, trying to get out from under the huge rock. The fairy of the 9 heavens lightly tapped the ground and flew to the boulder. Immediately, blood flowed out from the cracks of the boulder as if she was struck by a tremendous force. The flood dragon had no way to get out. It kept shaking its body but to no avail. How dare you occupy the gate of heaven with such little ability? You don't know what's good for you. I'll kill you first. The Empyrean fairy's words made the flood dragon feel real fear. It had gained intelligence and knew who was stronger and who was weaker. Through this fight, it knew that it was far from being a match for this person. It would be better to beg for mercy. The Empyrean fairy looked indifferent and did not care at all. A cold light appeared in her hand and she aimed at the flood dragon's vital point. Suddenly, a golden light rose from Tang Zheng's arm and flew directly above the flood dragon. The Empyrean fairy stopped attacking subconsciously and looked at the golden light in surprise. She asked, "What are you doing? You're going to kill it anyway. It's a pity. Why don't you give it to me?" The five-clawed golden dragon's voice flew out from the golden light. In the golden light, the five-clawed golden dragon's eyes were shining. He stared at the flood dragon and thought to himself, "God is really helping me. I've been imprisoned under the imperial city for hundreds of years and my cultivation has deteriorated too much. Now that I have this flood dragon, it can help me improve my cultivation and skills." The flood dragon and the dragon could not be compared. The dragon was a higher existence and was the direction that the flood dragon strived for. However, they had many things in common. Therefore, the five-clawed golden dragon could use the flood dragon to improve its strength. "What do you want it to do?" the Empyrean fairy asked suspiciously. Tang Zheng also looked at the five-clawed golden dragon curiously. He did not know what it was trying to do. The inner demons praised, "This five-clawed golden dragon is a good opportunity. I can't believe it can have such a harvest in the gate of heaven." Obviously, the inner demons saw through the five-clawed golden dragon's intention. Tang Zheng was just about to ask the inner demons when the five-clawed golden dragon swooped down toward the flood dragon with a flash of light. The five-clawed golden dragon's voice sounded, "Let's wait and see." The golden light wrapped around the flood dragon and made it tremble violently. Compared to the Empyrean fairy, the five-clawed golden dragon's draconic aura made the flood dragon tremble and fear from its soul. This was an instinctive fear. It had a deeper understanding of the draconic aura. This was something it had always been pursuing and it knew how powerful it was. Ow, ow, ow. A series of mournful screams did not change anything. The golden light turned into a huge dragon's head. The dragon opened its mouth and bit down on the flood dragon's head. The others could clearly see that the dragon's mouth was gradually swallowing the flood dragon. The flood dragon struggled even more violently. It was making its final struggle, but it still could not change anything. The outcome was already decided. The flood dragon disappeared into the dragon's mouth. Roar! The dragon's mouth let out a deafening dragon's roar that resounded through the gate of heaven. It made people's eardrums buzz and made many people feel frightened. Yan Luyun and Yan Qingyi opened their eyes wide at the same time and stared at this scene. This was completely beyond their understanding. Even though Yan Qingyi was always calm, her heart was surging with stormy waves. The dragon's head disappeared and turned into a mass of golden light. The golden light kept rolling like the clouds in the sky. It seemed to be brewing something. The Empyrean fairy turned her head to look at Tang Zheng and asked, "What's going on?" Tang Zheng only understood half of what was going on and could not explain the specific situation. He shook his head in confusion and said, "I don't know." The Empyrean fairy showed a disappointed expression. However, like the others, she still stared at the mass of changing golden light. She realized that all these changes were not simple. In a flash, the golden light changed again and gradually turned into a small golden dragon. It was shining and majestic. Its dragon's eyes emitted a golden light and it emitted a daunting draconic aura. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank as he stared at the dragon's claw. The Empyrean fairy looked at him and also stared at the dragon's claw. "Huh, why is there an extra dragon claw?" the Empyrean fairy muttered to herself. Tang Zheng cultivated the dragon god technique, so he knew what this meant. The five-clawed golden dragon's strength and cultivation had increased. It had even grown a sixth dragon claw. From now on, it was no longer a five-clawed golden dragon but a six-clawed golden dragon. This flood dragon was actually so useful. No wonder it could not help but rush out. This was indeed a rare opportunity like the inner demons had said. The six-clawed golden dragon's eyes were full of smiles. This was something it had dreamed of, and now it had become a reality. It shook its head and wagged its tail, flying in a circle in the air. It was overjoyed and flew in front of Tang Zheng. Its dragon eyes stared straight at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng reached out and touched the dragon's head. The others saw this scene and sucked in a breath of cold air. This was more shocking than pulling a tooth out of a tiger's mouth. The key point was that the six-clawed golden dragon did not show any signs of impatience. It was as docile as a kitten and did not have the domineering aura that dragons should have. Although the six-clawed golden dragon's strength had increased, its soul brand was still there. Therefore, even if it was domineering, it still had to restrain itself. It did not dare to have a temper. "Congratulations," Tang Zheng said from the bottom of his heart. The six-clawed golden dragon looked into his eyes and nodded, "Thank you." After saying this, it nodded towards the Empyrean fairy as a sign of gratitude. After all, if it was not for the Empyrean fairy bringing them to the gate of heaven, it would not have had this opportunity. The Empyrean fairy did not look sideways. She did not take this gratitude to heart. Yen Luyun smacked his lips. He wanted to ask if he could touch it, but seeing the six-clawed golden dragon's arrogant appearance, he swallowed the words back down. The six-clawed golden dragon looked around and swept its gaze across everyone. Other than Fang Shishir and the Empyrean fairy, everyone else felt a tremor from the depths of their souls. "Let's go back." Tang Zheng did not want to let everyone feel too much pressure and said to the six-clawed golden dragon. The six-clawed golden dragon blinked its eyes as if it was wronged. It wanted to say that it had just increased its strength and that it should show off for a while. However, after seeing Tang Zheng's expression, it obediently returned to Tang Zheng's arm and turned into a tattoo with an additional dragon claw. Chapter 12:21. The purine energy caused Tang Zheng's emotions to surge as he stared at the sky bed with shining eyes. The Empyrean fairy noticed Tang Zheng's strange behavior and said, "The sky bed is where the purine energy gathers in Heaven's Gate of Extreme Yin. It contains an extremely strong amount of purine energy. If you want to save her, you can only do it here." She sighed as she spoke. Back then, she had relied on the sky bed to escape disaster. It was precisely because she had absorbed too much purine energy that a lot of it was used up. However, it was still a lot, and normal people would not be able to handle it. "What method do you have?" The Empyrean fairy did not know how Tang Zheng was going to inject purine energy into Yidingdang's body. There were two indispensable conditions for her to be able to absorb the purine energy in the sky bed. First, she had the 9 Yin saint body and was very sensitive to purine energy. Her body also contained an extremely strong amount of purine energy, so she could resonate with the purine energy in the sky bed. Second, the Emperor of Heaven used a great technique to activate the purine energy in the sky bed. Only then could she successfully absorb it. Neither of these conditions could be missing. Yi Dingdang did not have the same unique conditions and advantages as her. Therefore, the Empyrean fairy was very curious as to how Tang Zheng was going to do it. Tang Zheng did not know and could only ask the inner demons for a plan. The inner demons laughed. Before he could speak, Tang Zheng felt a wretched aura rush towards him. "Are you planning something bad?" Tang Zheng frowned and asked. The inner demons was indignant, "Am I that kind of person? I'm teaching you how to save someone. If you have such a dirty idea, then I won't say it." Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and was too lazy to argue with him. He said crisply, "Hurry up and tell me. Don't keep me in suspense." The inner demons naturally did not dare to change their mind at the last minute. They said resentfully, "By connecting the power of yin and yang, and thus allowing the power of pure yin to circulate between heaven and earth and the human body, it will naturally be easy to inject it into Yidingdang's body. The key is, how do you activate the power of yin and yang?" Tang Zheng asked. "You've already figured out a way, so why don't you know it?" The inner demons asked. Tang Zheng was confused. When did he figure out a way? Why do you say that? To connect yin and yang, you naturally need pure yin energy and pure yang energy to circulate and communicate. Only then can you succeed. Do you still not understand? The inner demons asked implicitly. Tang Zheng widened his eyes and said bitterly, "Inner demons, don't keep me in suspense." The inner demons were slowly unraveling the mystery. What is the highest amount of pure yin energy you've absorbed? It's... Tang Zheng hesitated for a moment. In the end, he did not say that difficult word. It was as if a bolt of lightning flashed through his heart and he quickly understood what the inner demons were referring to. The highest amount of pure yin energy that Tang Zheng had absorbed was of course when he had sex with those women. At that time, yin and yang were in harmony and harmonized with each other. From there, the pure yin and yang energy would circulate and reach a state of harmony between yin and yang. Tang Zheng gradually understood and asked with mixed feelings, "You're saying that I had sex with Ding Dang?" The inner demons chuckled, "You're not stupid. You don't respect yourself as an old man." Tang Zheng was indignant. He had never thought that doing this could save lives. This was a bit of a fantasy. The inner demons retorted angrily, "You've urged me time and time again. When I told you the truth, you said that I don't respect myself as an old man. How preposterous." Tang Zheng said embarrassedly, "Who would have thought that you would be referring to this method? But this is the only way. If you don't believe me, you can ask the Empyrean Fairy." Tang Zheng naturally could not ask the Empyrean Fairy. After all, it was too difficult to ask. But from the fact that the Empyrean Fairy did not know the specific method, the Empyrean Fairy also did not know anything. Only the inner demons could have the final say. Seeing that Tang Zheng was silent, the inner demons said helplessly, "Believe it or not, it's up to you." Tang Zheng's mind was full of thoughts. Everyone looked at him with burning eyes. He was like a puppet, thinking without moving. At this time, he was especially charming and refreshing. "Well, I'll believe you for now. If I find out that you're lying and can't save Ding Dang at all, I'll definitely not let you go." Tang Zheng threatened without holding back. The inner demons was speechless. After a moment of silence, he indignantly retorted, "You're biting Lu Dongbin like a dog biting Lu Dongbin. You don't know how to appreciate good intentions." Just as his voice fell, he realized that his words seemed to be pointing at the mulberry tree and cursing the locust tree. It could be seen that Tang Zheng was completely focused on Yi Ding Dang and did not bicker with him. He inwardly rejoiced and felt a lingering fear. Seeing that everyone was looking at him expectantly, Tang Zheng coughed and said in a deep voice, "As far as I know, there is indeed a way to connect the yin and yang forces and inject the pure yin energy from the gate of heaven into Ding Dang's body. However, this method is not suitable for outsiders to know. So, everyone does not need to know the specific details. You just need to know that I can save Ding Dang." Seeing that Tang Zheng was making a solemn vow and stuttering, it was obvious that there was a secret. Everyone's hearts were ignited with the flames of gossip. They stared at Tang Zheng intently, hoping that he would reveal the secret. Tang Zheng found it difficult to open his mouth. He did not know how to tell the truth. Moreover, the other party was Yi Ding Dang. If he said it openly, how could she face other people in the future? He took a deep breath and ignored everyone's eager eyes. He said calmly, "Everyone, please leave. The rescue needs a quiet environment. No one can disturb us. I'll stay and help you. I'm very familiar with the gate of heaven. Maybe I can help you with twice the result with half the effort." The Empyrean Fairy volunteered. Tang Zheng sighed and said to himself, "If you stay, how can I have a relationship with Ding Dang? I'm not the kind of person who likes to be exposed in public." So, he refused without changing his expression, "Thank you, but I don't need your help for the time being." Seeing that he repeatedly refused, everyone knew that he must have other secrets, but it was not convenient for him to express them. Everyone's curiosity was aroused, but there was nothing they could do. "All of you stay outside and guard. You must not let anyone come in and disturb us. Otherwise, we will give up halfway. Our hard work and effort will be wasted." Tang Zheng deliberately said it in a very serious manner to attract everyone's attention. Sure enough, when these words came out, many people's expressions became serious. Especially the Ye family and Fang Shishir. These two parties had a close relationship with Yi Dingdang, so of course they did not dare to lower their guard. Yi Tianlei took a step forward and patted his chest as he promised, "Don't worry, with me here, unless they step over my dead body, no one can even think of taking half a step into the mine." Chapter 12:22. The Empyrean fairy stared deeply at Tang Zheng. In the end, she did not ask any questions and left with the others. Tang Zheng casually waved his hand, causing the sacred armor shield to fly out. It rapidly enlarged and became like a door, blocking the entrance. Tang Zheng gently placed Yi Dingdang on the heavenly bed and a wave of pure yin energy emanated from the heavenly bed, revolving around her endlessly. It was just that the pure yin energy could only linger around her body and was unable to enter her body. All of this was invisible to the naked eye but could be clearly felt. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank as he stared at the bed and Yi Dingdang. He asked, "Inner demons, it can't be that simple to activate the yin and yang energy, right? Just sex. You're getting smarter and smarter. You even guessed it. Of course, it can't be that simple. It must be accompanied by a corresponding mental cultivation method to succeed." The inner demons were slightly surprised. They could not help but think highly of Tang Zheng. "Then quickly tell me the mental cultivation method," Tang Zheng urged. As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of light flashed in Tang Zheng's mind and a shining mental cultivation method appeared. This mental cultivation method was like a stream of water that quickly merged into Tang Zheng's mind and could not be removed. "You should leave for now." Tang Zheng sealed the inner demons. Before the inner demons could say a word, they lost consciousness and could not see the outside world. Tang Zheng also laid down on the sky bed. The sky bed was ice-cold and refreshing. Pure yin energy immediately lingered around his body, but it was still unable to merge into his body. Yi Dingdang lay on the bed with her eyes wide open. She looked at Yi Dingdang suspiciously. She did not know how he was going to save her by sending the others away. "Dingdang, to save someone, you must activate the yin and yang energy. The only way to activate the yin and yang energy is..." Tang Zheng hesitated, not knowing how to start. Yi Dingdang blinked her eyes, clearly using her eyes to encourage him. Tang Zheng took a deep breath, deeply encouraged, and said truthfully, "I have to have a relationship with you in order to be able to trigger the yin and yang energy, and then help you absorb the pure yin energy. In addition, I can also absorb the pure yin energy during this process, and thus help me to balance the pure yang energy in my body." Yi Dingdang's eyes were filled with joy. It was said that not only could she save herself, but she could also save Tang Zheng. It was the best of both worlds. Although she didn't say a word, Tang Zheng understood what she meant and let out a long sigh of relief. "Dingdang, relax completely. The others can't see. It'll be fine in a while. After that, you'll be back to normal." Tang Zheng comforted her. Yi Dingdang mustered all her strength and answered softly. As if he was greatly encouraged, Tang Zheng's fingers fell on her chest and gently undid the buttons. After a while, Yi Dingdang was completely naked in front of him. It was as if a stone had been thrown into a lake, causing ripples to appear on the surface of the lake. Tang Zheng's breathing couldn't help but quicken. He pressed down on her, his broad chest pressing down on her body. They could clearly feel each other's heartbeat quicken, especially Yi Dingdang. Her heartbeat was originally very weak, but at this moment, it was like she had been injected with a cardiac stimulant. The two of them looked at each other and a deep love was communicated through their eyes. The heart sutras were silently activated in their hearts. When the two of them became one, the pure yin energy circling around their bodies began to ripple. Like a whale sucking in water, the pure yin energy entered Tang Zheng's body from the point of connection. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up. As he moved, he silently felt the pure yin energy. This pure yin energy was much more powerful and pure than the pure yin energy he had absorbed before. It was naturally very beneficial to him. The pure yang energy that had been restless in his body seemed to have smelled something, and all of them moved out, entangling with the pure yin energy. The two energies harmonized with each other, and the restless pure yang energy was immediately appeased. There was too much pure yin energy, so much so that Tang Zheng couldn't completely digest it. The excess pure yin energy once again flowed back out of Tang Zheng's body and then quickly gathered in Yi Dingdang's body. Her body was originally like a dry field. The pure yin energy was like rain. With the pure yin energy's nourishment, it was like a field that had been nourished by rain. It immediately burst forth with life. Tang Zheng could clearly feel that her life force was slowly recovering. He was delighted and hurriedly activated his heart sutras. The pure yin energy quickly flowed from his body to Yi Dingdang's body. Yi Dingdang opened her eyes wide in comfort. Her eyes regained their vitality as she looked at Tang Zheng with mixed feelings. As Tang Zheng's movements increased, she couldn't help but let out a soul-stirring sound. This space was immediately filled with an ambiguous atmosphere, causing people to be extremely shy. Yi Dingdang was immersed in it. She didn't care about being shy and completely enjoyed this wonderful process. There was no need to mention how delightful it was. The pure yin energy in the sky bed endlessly flowed into the two's bodies. Their erect bodies revealed the beauty of yang, while their slightly arched waists revealed the beauty of yin. The combination of hardness and softness indicated the harmony of yin and yang. This was the power of yin and yang, the great Tao of relations between heaven and earth. Outside the sacred armor shield, a group of people anxiously looked around but couldn't see anything. They anxiously paced back and forth. Feng Xinyang looked at Yi Tianlei, who was pacing back and forth. She impatiently waved her hand and scolded, "Tianlei, don't randomly walk around. You're making me dizzy." Yi Tianlei subconsciously stopped his footsteps. He sighed and said, "Aren't I anxious? Aren't I anxious?" Yi Tianlei was speechless. Fang Shishir advised, "Tang Zheng is very confident. Dingdang is blessed by the heavens and will definitely get better." The two of them looked at her deeply and said, "Definitely." Empyrean Fairy wished that she could see through the sacred armor shield and see how Tang Zheng was able to use the power of yin and yang to allow Yi Dingdang to freely absorb the pure yin energy. Even she couldn't think of a way. It was hard for her to imagine that such a method really existed in this world. However, she knew her priorities, so she wouldn't rashly rush in and ruin Tang Zheng's plan. Yan Luyun and Yan Qingyi also stared at the sacred armor shield. Yan Luyun couldn't suppress his curiosity and whispered, "Aunt, do you know how young Master Tang did it?" Yan Qingyi regretfully shook her head, "How could I know? Didn't you predict this?" Yan Luyun asked. Yan Qingyi rolled her eyes at him and didn't answer this question. Prophecy wasn't omnipotent. How could she know everything? Moreover, she wasn't worried about this problem. She was worried about something else. Before she came here, she vaguely felt a mysterious calling. However, ever since she stepped into the gate of heaven, this feeling disappeared without a trace. No matter how she tried to sense it, she couldn't find any clues. This was undoubtedly a huge setback. She had come all the way here to unravel the mystery. Why was it that when she arrived at her destination, there was nothing? Chapter 12:23. His gaze was as sharp as a knife as he looked into the distance, as if he wanted to pierce through the darkness. The Empyrean Fairy's brows furrowed. She had already heard the movement. Although the other party's voice was very soft, it still did not escape her ears. When the others saw this movement, they all jumped in fright and quickly turned their heads to look into the darkness. However, their strength was far from the Empyrean Fairies, so they did not discover anything strange. "What's wrong?" Fang Shishir asked. The Empyrean Fairy said in a deep voice, "Someone's coming." Could it be that stone giant again? Yan Luyun said in shock. "No." The Empyrean Fairy immediately denied and shook her head, "The other party has already entered the gate of heaven. The stone giant is too big, so there's no way for it to enter the gate of heaven." Yen Luyun nodded resentfully and asked suspiciously, then who could it be? Could it be those people who died in the Sea of Death? No one answered because they were also not sure. They all looked at the Empyrean fairy, who was also hesitant. Humph, who is it? Won't we know after testing it out? Feng Xinyang was in a hurry. In order to ensure her daughter's safety, she rushed out without a care for her own safety. She was determined to investigate the situation. She was like a whirlwind as she rushed into the darkness. A light suddenly appeared, and with a cry of alarm, a person flew out from the darkness. This scene attracted everyone's attention, especially the person who flew out. Feng Xinyang. Yi Tianlei cried out in alarm. He jumped up like a cannonball and caught Feng Xinyang. In just one exchange, Feng Xinyang was actually defeated. She flew back with a pale face. It was obvious that she had suffered a loss in the dark. The others stared in front of them in shock. It was so dangerous in the dark. Feng Xinyang was not a match for it. One had to know that Feng Xinyang was someone who had barely touched the edge of the Grandmaster realm. Ever since their fates had been tied together with Tang Zheng's, Tang Zheng had spared no effort in helping them on their path of cultivation, causing their cultivation to soar, far surpassing their normal cultivation speed. Yi Tianlei was slightly weaker than Feng Xinyang, so when he saw that she was not on the same level as him, he immediately understood the danger. But when he saw his wife's pale face, he felt like he was about to spit out a mouthful of anger. Feng Xinyang saw through his thoughts and quickly grabbed his sleeve. She advised, "Don't, we have to protect this door and not let the bad guys take half a step into the minefield. This is the most important thing." Yi Tianlei felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. He immediately calmed down. Unwilling to accept this, he glared fiercely at the darkness. "You're saying that there really are people in the dark?" Empyrean Fairy did not act blindly without thinking. The enemy's situation was unclear. For the sake of the big picture, it was better to clarify things first. Feng Xinyang said weakly, "Yes, and it's a martial artist." No one doubted her judgment. This was information that she had almost exchanged with her life, so it could not be false. Martial artist? Empyrean Fairy raised her eyebrows. How could there be a martial artist in this place? The gate of heaven was so mysterious that it was impossible for outsiders to find it. How could it be like a tail, following them here? The others' expressions also became serious. Good people did not come, and those who came had ill intentions. The other party deliberately hid in the dark, so there must be a conspiracy. Did you predict this? Empyrean Fairy asked Yan Qingyi curiously. Yan Qingyi shook her head blankly. No, I only predicted the scene in the painting. I'll go check it out. Fang Shishir volunteered. Don't. Yi Tianlei and his wife stopped her at the same time. Everyone knew how important Fang Shishir was to Tang Zheng. Naturally, they would not let her take the risk. If something happened to her, then Tang Zheng would go crazy. Empyrean Fairy stepped forward and said, "I'll meet them and see who they are." She could already confirm that the people who came were not from this island, but guests from the outside world who had just arrived. She knew a thing or two about the various powers in this world. Maybe the people in front of her were old acquaintances. Go! The Empyrean Fairy pointed her finger and a beam of light shot out from her hand. The painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale was suspended in midair. It shone brightly like a ball of light, dispelling the darkness and gradually revealing everything. Empyrean Fairy followed like a shadow and flew into the darkness with the mountain river map. The darkness could not cover her eyes. On the contrary, it made her eyes sharper and her mind more focused, not letting go of any clues. Suddenly, a scene appeared in her mind. There was a person in the darkness not far from her. She did not need to look at him at all as this person appeared clearly in her mind. Without any explanation, she moved her mind and a tornado flew out from the mountain river map and enveloped this person. Before the other party could make a sound, he was sent flying into the sky and hit the dome hard. With a thud, his head drooped and he fell limply to the ground, no longer breathing. In a few moves, she had eliminated an enemy. She did not let her guard down because she knew that the danger was not over yet. Instead, there was an even greater danger lurking in the darkness. The person who came was indeed a martial artist. At least, the person she eliminated was a martial artist. Moreover, his cultivation was not low at all. He was in the Grandmaster realm. In the past, the Grandmaster realm was the peak of cultivation in this world. But now, everything had changed. Grandmasters were gradually becoming more common. This was the change brought about by the advancement to a great world. Not only did it benefit cultivators, but even martial artists also benefited. Of course, it was a fool's dream for ordinary martial artists to advance to the Grandmaster realm. From this point of view, the enemy's vanguard was a Grandmaster martial artist, so the enemy hiding behind was more powerful. However, Empyrean Fairy was not afraid. Instead, she was somewhat angry. The divine gate was a gift left for her by the Emperor of Heaven, but it was trampled by these ungrateful people with evil intentions. This was a great disrespect. How could she just let it be? She walked step by step into the darkness with a frosty expression. Suddenly, 2 attacks came silently from the darkness. She did not blink or even turn her head. She pointed her finger lightly and 2 forces passed through the darkness. Puff, puff. 2 flowers of blood bloomed in the darkness. 2 people fell to the ground. Empyrean Fairy did not show mercy. These people were sneaking around. They were enemies and not friends. She had never shown mercy to her enemies. 1 person in the darkness did not react. No one even whispered to each other. This was a team with strict organization and discipline. It made people shudder. Humph, if you don't show yourself, I'll kill all of you. Let's see how long you can hide. Empyrean Fairy snorted angrily. Suddenly, another person appeared in the darkness. He clearly appeared in her mind. She was about to do the same thing, but when she was about to get close to him, he disappeared. How could a person disappear? Moreover, he was within the range of her perception. This was too abnormal. She immediately realized that something was wrong. She was on full alert. The mountain river map flew down and tried to strengthen her defense. However, all of this had already happened. A hand silently appeared behind her and slapped towards her back. The fingers of the hand were slender and well trimmed, like a woman's hand. They were sparkling and shiny. The Empyrean Fairy's hair stood on end. Even her hair was about to stand up. She didn't even turn around. Instead, she slapped her palms back from below her ribs at a very strange angle. Bang, bang. There were 2 muffled sounds. Both of them stepped back at the same time. A strong force came from her palms and passed to every cell and every meridian. She clearly felt the shock of the power. Her pupils shrank slightly. She twisted her neck, trying to find the enemy in the darkness. However, the enemy seemed to be one with the darkness. Even her perception was ineffective. She frowned in dissatisfaction and muttered to herself, "Are you playing hide-and-seek with me? This is the heavenly gate, my territory. You've chosen the wrong place." She could no longer hide the anger in her words. Her long hair and clothes fluttered in the absence of wind. She slowly rose into the air. The mountain river map cast a ray of light and enveloped her. In the darkness, she was a ray of light. The darkness around her was quickly dispelled. More and more places were exposed to her vision. Mountain river map, shine on the earth. She gently opened her mouth and a clear voice like a sweet spring burst out. It resounded through Divine Gate and spread to every corner. Feng Shishir and the others watched this scene without blinking. The various methods displayed by the mysterious Maiden of the 9 Heavens could be said to be miraculous, causing people to yearn for and admire her. Whoosh! A ray of light bloomed from the mountain river map. In an instant, the mountain river map was like a scorching sun, shining on the earth and illuminating every corner. There was nowhere to hide. The 9 heavens maiden looked down at everything from above. Not a single clue could escape her fiery golden eyes. Her expression changed as she looked at the enemy who had exposed themselves in surprise. The others also widened their eyes and looked at the group of uninvited guests in surprise. There were 20 to 30 enemies. Each of them was vigorous and imposing. One could feel the powerful aura coming from them just by looking at them. These people were wearing masks. Their faces could not be seen clearly. They were silent, but they gave off a strange oppressive feeling. It was hard to breathe. Who are these people? Fang Shishir asked in surprise. She had never seen these people before, especially so many martial arts experts. They were like bamboo shoots after a rain, suddenly emerging from the soil. The others shook their heads, especially Yen Luyun and Yen Qingyi. They were descendants of aristocratic families and knew a lot of inside information. They understood what these martial arts experts meant. In the past, if a family had 1 or 2 of these experts, they would be able to stand tall. But now, there were dozens of them. Could it be that martial arts experts could be mass-produced? No one knew the answer. Seeing the details in the darkness, they were full of questions. Empyrean Fairy could see more clearly. These dozens of people were at least martial arts masters. This made her daydream and even more puzzled. In today's world, it was very difficult to cultivate so many martial arts masters. Although she was not a martial artist, she knew a thing or two. Chapter 12:24. This group of people were all wearing masks, giving off a cold vibe. It was hard to see through them. Who are you? The Empyrean Fairy scolded. No one answered her. Pairs of eyes stared at her coldly through the masks. They glanced at the others. You don't want to answer? You can't hide. Let's see what you can do. The Empyrean Fairy snorted and activated her spell. The painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale shone brightly like the sun, forcing people to close their eyes subconsciously. Kill! She ordered in her heart. Swoosh! 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 Ice blades flew out from the stately painting. They flew above the heads of these people in an instant, as if they were going to pierce into their bodies in the next second. Bang! 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 There was a series of explosions. The ice blades exploded and turned into ice shards. They had no attack power at all. This. The Empyrean Fairy's pupils constricted. She turned pale with fright. She was a spellcaster and could feel it the most. A formless energy flew out from these people at the same time, intercepting her ice blades. When did martial artists reach such a level of synchronized counterattack? The martial artists' eyes shone as if they were mocking the Empyrean Fairy. They were silently mocking and ridiculing her. What's going on? Yi Tianlei thought that this attack would definitely succeed. He did not expect this result. Moreover, he was a martial artist and could feel the reactions of these people very clearly. These people did not seem like martial artists anymore. Or rather, they were worlds apart from ordinary martial artists. Kill! The opponents shouted in unison. Their voices shook the surroundings. The sound waves converged into a long spear, which was thrown at the Empyrean Fairy. It was visible to the naked eye. This is a spell. Yi Tianlei was the first to exclaim. Impossible. These people are martial artists. How can they use spells? This completely overturned his understanding. The others were also dumbfounded by this scene. Although the Empyrean Fairy was shocked, she knew that she had encountered a powerful enemy. Moreover, it was very strange and bizarre. She could not afford to be distracted. She crossed her hands and spread out her 10 fingers, triggering the Purine energy in the divine gate. Although most of the Purine energy in the gate of heaven was gathered on the heavenly bed, the air was still filled with Purine energy. She had the 9 saint body. The Emperor of Heaven had once used his great power to allow her to freely communicate with the Purine power in the Elysium. Therefore, she could draw on the pure Yin power. Pure Yin energy converged like turbulent clouds, surging towards the mysterious spear from all directions. Boom! The walls of the cave trembled violently for a moment, and a lot of dust fell from the cave before the trembling stopped. Everyone took a closer look and was shocked to find that the spear had disappeared. Instead, pure Yin energy gathered and surged towards the enemy like a black cloud. Feng Shishir and the others were excited and secretly cheered. The Empyrean fairy was extraordinary. Although these enemies were mysterious and powerful, they might not be her match. However, they did not have time to be happy for long. These people were chanting something, and a shocking syllable rang out. Ma. As soon as the syllable rang out, the momentum between heaven and earth seemed to solidify. The rolling pure Yin energy also paused, like frozen water, maintaining the rolling posture. It was very strange. The Empyrean fairy was shocked. This syllable was very familiar. She stared at the enemy with shining eyes, as if she wanted to distinguish the person she suspected from the crowd. But these people were wearing masks and dressed the same, so there was no way to distinguish the target. She didn't just sit there and wait for her death. Instead, she shouted, "The renowned supremacy Ji Wuxiang is actually hiding in the shadows. When did you become a coward?" This syllable had exposed everything. This was the 6 words of the non-phase method. The Empyrean fairy had experienced the mystery of it and knew how powerful it was. However, as far as she knew, the non-phase method was Ji Wuxiang's special skill. It was a secret that was not passed on. How could he pass it on to so many people? Were these people his confidants? Were they the forces left behind by the flying guillotine? The flying guillotine disintegrated in the hands of Tang Zheng and disappeared. This time, the other party did not use the flying guillotine's special skill, so the Empyrean fairy could not make up her mind. But there was no doubt that the strength of these people was not inferior to the flying guillotine. With the help of the non-phase method, their strength was far beyond that of the flying guillotine. The non-phase method was used to deal with all the people with distracting thoughts and killing intent. They were all secular people, so it was inevitable that they would not be contaminated with this vulgar aura. Could it be that they were going to be defeated in the hands of Ji Wuxiang? Everyone's heart sank. They had an ominous premonition. The Empyrean fairy's momentum was vigorous. She did not accept her fate. Instead, her eyes burst out with a sharp gaze, staring at the enemy. Ji Wuxiang was one of them, but he had learned to be smart. He did not reveal any traces, making people unable to see through him. The trick of capturing the leader first to capture the bandits was no longer effective. "Ha, mysterious maiden of the 9 heavens, your provocation isn't brilliant at all. Do you think I'm that kind of inexperienced child who would fall for your provocation?" Ji Wuxiang's voice rang out, reverberating through the crowd, making it impossible for people to lock onto him. The Empyrean fairy remained calm and collected. Her eyes searched the crowd for a long time, but she did not find anything. "In fact, this time, thanks to you, I can find the legendary Gate of Heaven." Ji Wuxiang spoke again, taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. The Gate of Heaven is the most mysterious secret territory of the Fu clan. It hides great secrets and treasures. If you can see through the mystery, you will become the new generation of Emperor of Heaven. Hee, I will gladly accept this big gift." The Empyrean fairy's face darkened. She said, wild ambition. But you will be disappointed. I don't know where you heard this false rumor, but it is too wrong. The Gate of Heaven is only an island. How can it be the secret territory of the Fu clan, not to mention the treasures and becoming the Emperor of Heaven? It is simply a bunch of nonsense. The Empyrean fairy's powerful rebuttal did not seem to be a lie. Ji Wuxiang hid in the crowd and stared at her with a pair of bright eyes, wanting to see through her appearance and see her true nature. "You think I will believe this kind of lie that can fool a 3-year-old child?" Ji Wuxiang's voice sounded again. "It is up to you whether you believe it or not. I am speaking the truth. If this is true, then why did you come to the Gate of Heaven?" Ji Wuxiang did not know that they were here to save Yi Dingdang. He thought that they were here to uncover the treasures and secrets of the gate of heaven. Ha, you actually did not know what we were here for and yet you chased after us. Your intelligence network is clearly not as efficient as you think it is. The Empyrean fairy said sarcastically. Without a doubt, the news must have been leaked. That was why Ji Wuxiang was like a cat that smelled blood and chased after them. Ji Wuxiang was not angry at all and said calmly, "No matter what you are here for, you have brought me to the gate of heaven. This is a great reward. You said that there is nothing in the gate of heaven and that everything is a false rumor. Why would I believe you? I only believe in my own eyes and judgment." Ji Wuxiang obviously did not give up. He looked at the sacred armor shield behind the Empyrean fairy and the others. His eyes flashed and greedily locked onto the sacred armor shield, wanting to see through it. You said that there is no treasure, then what is behind the sacred armor shield? You are not going to tell me that there is nothing, right? Ji Wuxiang seemed to have found a flaw and thought that he had hit the nail on the head. There is nothing in there that is useful to you. The Empyrean fairy said unhappily. The heavenly bed gathered too much pure yin energy. It was useless to Ji Wuxiang, so what she said was the truth. However, in Ji Wuxiang's eyes, this was an extremely laughable lie. Ha, whether it is useful to me or not is up to me to decide. It is not up to you. Ji Wuxiang said jokingly. He changed his tone and asked, Tang Zheng has been with you all this time. Where did he go? Could it be that he is inside? That has nothing to do with you. It seems like I guessed correctly. I am really curious as to why Tang Zheng went in and blocked you all outside. What is his goal? It seems like I have to go in and take a look. I cannot let him beat me to it. Hearing this, Yi Tianlei shouted, Ji Wuxiang, this is not the Azure Dragon Palace. How can you do whatever you want? If you want to go in, you will have to step over my dead body. Ji Wuxiang looked at Yi Tianlei with disdain and said, an insignificant unfilial son of the Ye family dares to be noisy in front of me. So what if I step over your dead body? It is not that difficult. Moreover, how can I be the one to clean up the family? Naturally, there will be someone to do it for me. As soon as he finished speaking, an angry roar sounded out like a thunderclap. Unfilial son, you have sided with the enemy and betrayed the Ye family. Today, I will clean up the family. One person took off his mask and shouted. Yi Xuanji, father. One by one, their eyes widened as they looked at this person in disbelief. He was actually the head of the Ye family, Yi Xuanji. When did he join Ji Wuxiang? This discovery was explosive enough to shock everyone. After all, he was the head of the family, yet he had actually given himself to Ji Wuxiang, this. Suddenly, everyone remembered what Tang Zheng had said. The Ye family was no longer the same as before. They no longer had the glory of the past and were instead controlled by Yi Meiyu. Even Yi Ke had betrayed Yi Xuanji and submitted to Yi Meiyu. There was nothing more to it than the betrayal of the family. Yi Xuanji was disheartened, and it was not impossible for him to submit to Ji Wuxiang. However, looking at Yi Xuanji's crazy and stubborn eyes, everyone realized that he had changed from before. The last bit of calmness and peace had disappeared, leaving behind only a vicious aura. Perhaps as long as it was a member of the Ye family, he would want to get rid of them as soon as possible. At this moment, Yi Xuanji's thoughts were indeed like this. He had fallen into the abyss of paranoia and was unable to extricate himself. He only remembered that Yi Tianlei had different opinions with him and left the Ye family, but he did not remember Yi Tianlei's contributions and what he had done to Yi Tianlei's family. Chapter 1225. Hearing Feng Xinyang's accusation, Yi Xuanji was so angry that his entire body trembled. He glared at her and shouted, Feng Xinyang, I shouldn't have agreed to let you marry into the Ye family. That's why this unfilial son listened to your instigation and betrayed the Ye family. You evil woman. This accusation did not anger Feng Xinyang in the slightest. Her nerves were thick, and she had been tested for a long time. She had long been accustomed to these kinds of rumors, so she said disapprovingly, Tianlei is sensible, he knows who is better for him. You keep saying that you are good for him, but in reality you are doing it for your own benefit. You are simply the scum of your father. Since they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, she might as well be more thorough. Feng Xinyang's fiery personality exploded and did not leave him any face. Yi Xuanji's entire body trembled. His face turned red and green. When the others saw this scene, they could not help but admire. Perhaps, only Feng Xinyang dared to go against Yi Xuanji so loudly. Yi Tianlei remained silent. His expression kept changing. On one side was his wife, and on the other side was his father. He was sandwiched in the middle. One could imagine how he felt. His gaze swept across his wife and father's face. Finally, his expression became firm as he stared at Yi Xuanji. His gaze seemed to be able to penetrate everything. It was so sharp that no one could look at him directly. Seeing this, Yi Xuanji's heart thumped. He had an ominous feeling. He had never seen Yi Tianlei look at him with such a gaze. It was sharp. You gave birth to me, but you have gone against me time and time again. I have nothing to say about this. But you insulted my wife. As her husband, I cannot tolerate it. What I, Yi Tianlei, owe you, I will return it all to you and the Ye family. From today onwards, I, Yi Tianlei, will no longer have anything to do with the Ye family. Yi Tianlei's tone was firm, making others feel respect. Yi Xuanji was furious. He wanted to shout again, but he saw Feng Xinyang's expression change. She reached out her hand to stop something, but it was too late. In a situation where no one expected, Yi Tianlei's hand flashed and a sharp blade appeared. He directly stabbed it into his own chest. Pooh! The blade stabbed into his chest without any resistance. Blood flowed out from his chest. No! At this moment, Feng Xinyang cried out. But it was too late. Actually, when she heard her husband's firm words, she knew that he wanted to do something. But she was too late to stop him. Yi Tianlei was like a statue, he did not fall down, but his face had already turned pale from the pain. He looked at Yi Xuanji coldly, as if he was looking at a stranger. From this moment on, the guilt in his heart flowed out of his body along with the blood. He had a clear conscience. The Ye family gave it to me. Today, I will return it to the Ye family. Yi Tianlei took a deep breath and said with difficulty. Yi Xuanji was dumbfounded. He did not expect his son to have such an extreme action. He was so courageous. He looked at him blankly, not knowing what to do. Tianlei, why are you so stupid? Feng Xinyang held her husband. Her tears fell as she bitterly asked. Yi Tianlei's lips curled into a relieved smile. He weakly said, You've been with me for so many years. It's been hard on you. In order to not let you and Ding Dang be shrouded in the Ye family's shadow, I can only do this. I have a clear conscience. Stupid. You're really stupid. Feng Xinyang was already unable to say more. Because, she understood her husband. Her heart ached for him. Tianlei, hold on. I will save you. She was very clear that the sharp blade had already pierced his chest. The situation was very critical. If she did not save him in time, she might lose her husband. But she was not good at medicine. She could only ask the Empyrean fairy for help, please, save him. The Empyrean fairy pointed at his chest and protected his heart. She protected his last bit of life. The blood immediately stopped. She took out a pill and said, feed him. Feng Xinyang quickly took the pill. Ji Wuxiang's voice sounded at this time. Yi Xuanji, do you still want to watch the show? Yi Xuanji could not hold it in anymore and roared, I will clean up you unfilial descendants. He charged over. Feng Xinyang's hands were not empty. She could not stop him. Moreover, her cultivation was not small compared to Yi Xuanji's. Whoosh! A graceful figure appeared and stood in front of Feng Xinyang to protect her. Feng Shishir. She finally made her move. She was not used to seeing all this. Although she did not hate evil like Yi Dingdang and had a fiery personality, she was still very righteous. She could not hold back her anger and charged towards Yi Xuanji. Yi Xuanji did not put Feng Shishir in his eyes at all. He snorted in disdain, "Little girl, you don't know what's good for you. Then I'll fulfill your wish." He already had the intention to kill. With a flash of his sword, Yi Xuanji's sword had already arrived in front of Feng Shishir. His sword technique had absorbed a lot of the wind-chasing sword technique's essence. Although he could not fully grasp its essence, it was still very powerful. Feng Shishir had just broken through to the Golden Core realm not long ago. She was equivalent to a master-level martial artist. Yi Xuanji had trained hard for his entire life and was only a master-level martial artist. However, he did not know how powerful Feng Shishir was. He thought that he would definitely win. Feng Shishir would become a ghost under his sword. Feng Shishir stared at the cold light coming towards her. She moved lightly and silently dodged the attack. Yi Xuanji was shocked. He was surprised by Feng Shishir's reaction. However, he did not pay much attention to it. Subconsciously, he thought that it was just a coincidence. Feng Shishir was just too lucky. But in the next second, he wanted to slap himself. Feng Shishir came to his back without leaving a trace. With a flash of light in her hand, she had already reached Yi Xuanji's back. Yi Xuanji's hair stood on end. He was shocked. Relying on his many years of battle experience, he quickly turned sideways and stabbed Feng Shishir with his sword. Feng Shishir did not have enough battle experience. She greatly underestimated Yi Xuanji's reaction. When she saw the sharp sword coming straight for her, she was already too late to react. The sharp sword pierced her body ruthlessly, but it only made a small cut on her clothes before it stopped. Yi Xuanji looked at this scene as if he had seen a ghost. No matter how much strength he used, the sword was unable to move forward. Could it be that her body is so strong that even my sword can't break through her defense? A huge question mark appeared in Yi Xuanji's mind. His brows instantly furrowed, and his expression became extremely complicated. Lowering her head to look at the sword in her chest, the corner of Feng Shishir's mouth curled up into a bitter smile. Luckily, she had the golden jade purple robe that Tang Zheng gave her. Otherwise, her body would have definitely been pierced by this sword. She was so scared that she broke out in cold sweat. She had underestimated Yi Xuanji after all. The other party was the head of a family. After all, he was extraordinary and could not be underestimated.